Yo. Oh, hey. Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night wherever you are on this planet. Um, I hope you like my music, everybody. It's fantastic. I have made a revolution with this. I have made Islamic hip hop, Islamic music, Islamic beats. Nobody does it like me. And I'm here today with Derek, Myth Vision. Hello,
Howdy,
Derek Myth
y'all.
Vision. How are you doing?
How y'all doing out there down yonder?
I, I forgot that we are doing that.
Yeah, I told you you're supposed to stick to the script, bro.
I forgot. No, let's start from the beginning. Let's stop this here. Yeah, so we are a little bit late, as it should be. That's fantastic. Yeah, Derek, what's up? What are we doing today?
So I figure we would just review the debate between Daniel and David Wood.
Oh yeah,
I don't want to mess up Daniel's last name. I literally butcher it. I say Daniel Haqiqatjou. Is that correct?
that's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So both of them debate, and we're kind of third party. We're people who don't agree with either side completely. And we're going to be talking about what happened in that debate, just taking it piece by piece, maybe trying to get through as much as we can of them actually debating. If you want to get to the Q&A at some point where you ask your questions, sure, but you've already done a video about that where he was mocking your anxiety and stuff like that. But I want to try and be as fair and as balanced as possible from my perspective on what I honestly think about it. I came from the David Wood, background. So I used to be a staunch Christian. So I know what David's saying when he's saying it and some valid points I'll bring up, but also on the other side, I'd like to, I want to be fair. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I understand. So what you're saying is you want to just say whatever people want to hear from you say. That's what I understand from this. Uh, I also want to say from my part, everyone knows that I don't like David Wood at all, and I'm a big fan of Daniel Haqiqatjou. So I might be a little bit biased today, but I will try to be as fair as I can. So we want to go through some of the content, some of the stuff that happened during this debate. What we're doing here is I am an ex-Muslim, Derek is an ex-Christian. And we both have our independent, separate thoughts on these matters. We both shared our opinions in the back. It was like we were having a phone conversation actually about this whole stuff, and then we thought, hey, why not just sit down and talk about this in public? And it would be nice. So we thought, let's just do it. So we decided to do this. There are things where there are parts where I agree very much with David, parts where I think, okay, Daniel Haqiqatjou said something fair, parts where Derek agrees with David, or parts where he disagrees with him. I explicitly told him that it's not allowed on my platform to agree with Daniel Haqiqatjou and to disagree with David Wood. So if he does that, he will be kicked out from here.
Well, if you boot me, I'm coming back for you, man.
Yeah,
I'm going to find you.
I'll ban you. And at some point, you might have a guest drop by as well. Also, if David wants to join, I texted him earlier, but he didn't get back to me. It's always a hit or miss with him to reach him. But if he wants to join at some point to just tell us his opinion, he's welcome to do that. And of course, if our dear friend Daniel Haqiqatjou wants to join us for this conversation and also share his opinions with us, he's also welcome to join us. He can also always contact us and we can give him the invite link and all that. But for now, let's go ahead and start looking at the debate. What we want to do is we don't want to go through the entire debate here. We want to look at the opening statements of both sides, analyze them, comment on them, make some conclusions based on that, and then we want to proceed forward. We also have certain things in our minds that happened later on in the debate that we can never ever come to because the debate was 3.5 hours long, almost 5 hours, 4 hours long. So it's a little bit problematic. But yeah, let us go ahead and start right away. If there are any discrepancies between our voices and the sounds or anything, just let me know. So far, nobody is complaining, and if nobody is complaining, then everything should be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead with this then. Let me share my screen here. of
The debate.
the beautiful face of James. What is this? What
Is
is
it flashing? And
What the hell is going on?
look, the gin are already trying to get you, bro. What the hell?
Yeah. Oh, now it works. Okay,
There
that's
you go.
fine. That is interesting.
That's
Yeah.
like
So
speaking in tongues, bro. You know what I'm saying?
I have done my my service to society, my contribution to humanity, and have left a like on this stream on Modern Day Debate, where we are watching this. And you can also contribute to humanity and can do the same. Yeah, I'm sorry for the flashing. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I couldn't put a warning on here, but yeah. There's some new functions added.
You're testing everything. Yeah, everything's working pretty good.
Fancy, man. I just don't want us to block the screen. Anyway,
Hey everybody, today we're debating
is everything okay? Do you hear this?
Christianity, Islam, violence, and intolerance, and we're starting right now.
Right now. Sound okay, everybody? To you as well? I guess it is okay. Perfect.
With
sound.
David Wood's opening statement. Thanks so much for being with us, David. The floor is all yours.
Hey, that was quick. Start a timer here. Well, hello again, YouTube. Looks like I'm back. Just got unbanned again this morning. I'd like to thank Modern Day Debate for setting up this exchange, and Daniel for representing the Muslim perspective. Daniel has a reputation as someone who doesn't lie about his religion, which will be a breath of fresh air compared to most of the American and British Muslim apologists I've interacted with over the past 15 years or so. Trust me, all you westernized Muslim apologists who are watching, when you tell us that there's no death penalty for apostasy in Islam, or that Aisha was 19 years old when she married Muhammad, this may win you some cheap dawah points with people who don't know any better, but it becomes impossible for the rest of us to take you seriously. But if you're honest about your book and your prophet, then even if we disagree with you completely, we can at least have a serious discussion with you. So hats off to Daniel for having the integrity that's so often lacking in Western dawah. The topic before us was suggested by Daniel. As far as I can tell, here in my opening statement, I'm supposed to present the Christian perspective on violence and tolerance. There's obviously a lot that can be said on this issue, but given the time constraints, I'm going to cover three essentials. One.
Okay, a few things that need to be said here. One, absolutely correct. Most Muslim apologists completely dance around the questions and don't answer them honestly and appropriately and directly. Daniel Haqiqatjou has a reputation for giving us straight, honest answers about what Islam actually comments and what it actually says. The thing is, he's only as honest as it gets so far. We can see later on, especially during the Q&A, that he's not entirely honest, that he tries to deflect from certain questions. Yeah, okay, somebody said the audio became a little bit echoey, but I can just put my headphones on and that might fix it.
Is it echoing?
A little bit.
Let me do this.
Okay, fine.
I think it might be me. If I may say one thing too up front. Now let me test that. Go ahead and talk real quick.
Hello, hello, hello. 1, 2, 3. This is me. This is me. Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3.
I'm gonna walk and climb a tree, and then I'm gonna take a pee. Okay. Anyway, yeah, they talk about pee in this as well too. It's really weird. But anyway, the whole thing about what David is setting up, I wouldn't say all Muslims will obviously agree with Daniel's conclusions, right? So we know there are different kind of sects of Islam and such, and so
you said sects, right? Not sex.
Yeah, right. It's tough with my southern accents to distinguish between different groups and people in intercourse. But anyway, the biggest thing though is I'm a big proponent of trying to have people become more progressive with their religion. And I know that a lot of people go, no, the whole thing needs to collapse. Well, I don't see that happening. So I'd much rather people take a softer approach and seeing the crap that he's going to discuss, right? That I mean, he's being consistent in the sense that he's saying, this is what I stand for. I'm okay with these things. We'll hear those things that are being discussed along the way. But at the end of the day, I hope Muslims that maybe watch this will say, I don't want that conclusion. That's my hope. I don't like ontologically. I don't think I'm going to convince any Muslim to just, oh, one day I believe, one day I don't. That deconversion process is not easy to do. So listening to that, I would hope more Muslims stop thinking that way. I mean, even Kuwait, for example, when I went there, they're starting to have malls like us. They have the fast food restaurant chains like us. There's a lot of things they're mimicking about Western culture and Western society, even though they're still practicing Islam. That would be a much better world if everything started to become more progressive rather than, 1400 years ago. We're going to act like we're living in that time. That's something I'm progressive thought, or if you will, reforming to that degree. So
absolutely. I mean, I would prefer it if Islam was a religion that could make progress. If it was a progressive religion that can adapt to society, that doesn't have this strict, rigid rule of staying exactly at its fundamentals and having universal, timeless commands. That is something that is very much unique to Islam. Islam is unique in the sense that it has these very specific commands and a very specific set of laws by which a society should be ruled, and it is absolutely unchangeable and literal. You have to stick to that. Now, there are currents in Islamic history that try to kind of deviate from that a little bit and try to reinterpret Islamic law by what is better in the in the common interest. But these currents are currently also being tackled in a very hostile way by people like Daniel Haqiqatjou, who say, no, we will not do that. We will stick exactly to what the scripture says. The scripture says this is for all times and for everyone, and we will stick to that. We will not change for the sake of humans and for the sake of common benefit and whatever it is. So he has a very traditionalist approach to things. And the thing is, what's bad about it is that he sticks to that and insists on that.
Mm-hmm.
What's good about it is that he honestly tells us exactly what the scripture says and what the scholars have said for 1,400 years. So,
and I just want to say one thing on David is trust me, I just mentioned the Daniel thing here, but I do think that Daniel brings some good, consistent argumentation to the table. So, we need to give credit where credit's due in terms of what a person's trying to do, even if you don't like the guy. At the end of the day, I think that he had some consistent arguments. But what are we doing? This is the real thing. Before we even get started, I just want to say, look at the conclusion. The conclusion is we live under a theocracy, under Sharia law, where you and I are definitely going to be in big, big trouble, okay, for our thoughts and for our expressions against this particular religion or any other religion, just trying to let people know, hey, we have a different conclusion on things. But in a society where they would want us executed, or at least he would, I want to talk to the guy. I wrote the guy, I said, look, I'm not against you. Like I have no personal anything. I'd love to talk with you and just have a discussion to see where you go. I don't debate people, but I love having conversations. And that's something that I want to do, but he never got back to me.
Who?
Daniel. But yeah, no, I'd absolutely love to have a conversation and find out like what drew him in this way to go down this path and what makes him take these conclusions. Anyway,
the thing is, I shared this earlier, just a half an hour ago. But I've been having these discussions with these Muslim apologists who are fans of Muhammad hijab and the likes. And here I received this, which seems is the current norm among people who agree with Daniel Haqiqatjou and the likes. I say, for example, rape, suicide, incitement, and targeted harassment. Can they all be justified because it is someone you don't like? Be more specific, please. And he says, you are not simply someone we don't like. You are an apostate and thus one of the worst of beings. See how I'm getting almost ratioed by these Muslims, and 29 people agree with him. And this is just one example. It looks like this with the whole debate and the discussion that is currently going on. And people like Daniel Haqiqatjou are, strict proponents of exactly this worldview. You are an apostate. You don't have anything to say. It is entirely justifiable to be as harsh as possible and as hateful as possible toward you. You don't deserve love. And that's messed up. It's like he might argue in successful ways. He might reach certain things in debates. He might make arguments. He might make some progress with logical fallacies, which he does all the time. But just because you seem to have a way of speaking and a way of putting down your arguments, that doesn't mean your arguments are at all reasonable and acceptable to the average human experience.
That's what I was. Okay, so yes, we're on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Oh, and one final note here. What, as you just heard, it was Daniel Haqiqatjou himself who proposed the topic, violence and tolerance in Christianity and Islam. What is very funny is during the whole debate, it seems to me that Daniel Haqiqatjou never actually addresses the topic of the debate, which is very confusing to me. But we'll get to that.
Can't hear it. I can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
Nope. Maybe you turn the volume down, I think, maybe.
Can anybody else hear it? Can people hear it? What's up? What's up? Do I see comments? Yeah, people can hear it. People can hear it.
Okay.
People can hear it.
Can hear it.
People can hear it.
Really quiet, they say.
Sound low, really quiet. Oh, okay. Wait. Share screen, share system audio.
To the biblical teaching that even though
Now, does it work?
Good to go.
Okay. Yeah, the system changed my audio. That's why I had to do it again.
we love everyone, some people are especially bad or dangerous, and that this influenced Christian thought when it was combined with Jesus' command to love everyone. To the biblical teaching that even though we love everyone, some people are especially bad or dangerous, and that there is a role for violence in protecting people from harm. And 3, the Christian integration of these two biblical teachings. That is, how do we protect society from dangerous people while still loving and honoring all people? First, the image of God. The Christian perspective on violence and tolerance begins with the teaching in the very first chapter of the Bible that human beings, all human beings, men and women, are created in the image of God.
You can tell me to stop for a second whenever you need to say something, just so you know.
There's just so much stuff, but I want us to get through this because I mean we could go exhaustive and stuff, but like
yeah.
7 says, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. In Genesis 9, the basis for the prohibition against murdering another human being is that humans are created in the image of God. In the New Testament, the book of James, James says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. James's objection to cursing other human beings is that they're created in the image of God, whom we praise. So our view of other human beings as created in God's image is supposed to have an impact on how we act towards them. In Matthew 5, Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. We can see how this command to love even our enemies, combined with the biblical teaching that all human beings are created in the image of God, influenced early Christian thought. In Romans 12, the Apostle Paul says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with everyone. If your enemy is hungry, feed him, and if he is thirsty, give him a drink. In 1 Corinthians 16, he says, let all that you do be done in love. In 1 Thessalonians 3, he says, may the Lord cause you to increase and abound in love for one another and for all people.
Anything you want to add, or should we just go?
Look, no. I think that what David is showing, yes, this is an elbow in the road in many respects. The New Testament does take kind of an elbow. What Daniel's going to do, and we're going to see this, is he's going to logically try to connect. You Christians want to use the Old Testament, and you want to say it's obsolete, but you still have to explain the triune God and its explanation for why he permitted the things we see in the Hebrew Bible. And we'll get to these things, but I feel like Marcionism would have been a better approach because at least he said God is all love. Either way, David is just pointing out what the New Testament is trying to teach and how Christians followed that, especially the first couple centuries before it became a state religion under Constantine. And of course, then it gets used as a political power tool. So yeah.
The issue here is, I get what Daniel Haqiqatjou is doing, and I partially agree even with the implications that he makes about the theology of Christianity. He says, in Christian theology, the God of the Bible was, the God of the Old Testament is the same God as the God of the New Testament. If he now gives you love and peace and forgiveness and loving your enemies and this and that, is he not also the same guy who told you earlier to do this and this and this to people? So how can you be such a hypocrite? And that's what he says. And there are certain aspects in that I agree with, but the problem is, okay, that might be a debate a good debate that you could address and that you could go into. It is a nice theological question, a good theological debate. You could go into that, but what does it have to do with the topic? Because what David Wood is doing here is he says Christianity is not violent, it preaches peace, while Islam is violent and it preaches intolerance and aggression, violence. Whether you now say that the Christian preachings of forgiveness and tolerance are inconsistent with its own theology or not is entirely besides the point. It is a nice objection to make. It is an interesting theological debate to have, but they are besides the point, because the point is Christianity is not inherently violent.
So yes, this is the point we come back to. The first few centuries of Christianity is a huge, murky, muddy water situation. It's difficult to know exactly how it all started, and there are various sects. But yes, what we see is at worst demonizing of other sects of Christian groups, meaning you guys are working for the devil or this and that. No sword drawing, cutting heads off, killing people who disagree with you. It is later on that you do see this happen under a political Christian kind of theocracy. This isn't happening. Early Christians are being martyred. Now, how big of martyrdom? Some say that this is mythologized and they make it a little bit bigger, like everyone's getting killed because they're a Christian, but it was happening. And so, yes, they were being killed rather than killing for their belief. Now, you go back and trying to connect it theologically, I see what Daniel's doing. He makes some good points about how do you connect those things, which is why a man named Marcion in the 2nd century came on the scene and said, that God is not the God of Jesus. That was his whole argument. But we'll get into all that stuff, I think, as time goes by.
Yeah. Okay.
The author of Hebrews in Hebrews 12 says, pursue peace with all people. In 1 Peter 2, the Apostle Peter tells us to honor all people. So whether you are Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, young, old, white, black, straight, gay, trans, whatever, you are created in the image of God. And Christians are commanded to love and respect you based on our shared nature and the love of God. This doesn't mean that we have to love and respect your ideas or your decisions or your actions. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be punished for crimes. We can love someone and still believe that he is a danger to others and that he needs to be stopped. This brings us to our second point. According to the Bible, governments have the authority to punish wrongdoers and the obligation to protect people's rights. This includes the authority to use violence when necessary. In Romans 13, Paul calls rulers avengers who bring wrath upon the ones who practice evil. He says that the ruler does not bear the sword for nothing. But this authority doesn't mean that rulers get to do whatever they want. In the book of Acts, chapter 25, the Roman governor Festus wants to hand Paul over to his Jewish enemies who are plotting to kill him. Paul responds to the governor, if I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. So Paul was convinced that the government was supposed to protect him from people who wanted to kill him over his religious views. And he was convinced that no one, not even the government, had the right to kill him if he hadn't done anything that merited a death sentence. The Christian perspective on governments then, punish wrongdoers and protect rights. Sometimes this involves violence. Third point. How do we reconcile the Christian belief that we're supposed to love everyone and to honor all people and to pursue peace with all people with the fact that some people need to be punished and that there are wars that may need to be fought? One thing Christians did early on was to influence governments to have more concern for human life. This was obviously connected to Christian love for others. I'll give two examples. First, when Christians began preaching the gospel in the Roman Empire, the favorite form of entertainment among the Romans was the gladiatorial games. The crowd would cheer with glee as slaves and prisoners were forced to hack each other to pieces. Christians were horrified at the bloodshed because they believed that human beings are created in the image of God. What did they do about it? But first, when they had no political power and Christianity was still an illegal religion, they boycotted the games.
I hear an AC unit or something in the background, but go ahead.
Oh, you do? Sorry.
I thought I did, but not.
Yeah, I have one here. There's something that I'm tempted to say. It's just I kind of want to wait with it, but I largely agree with what David is saying. The issue is bringing up certain objections to violence is not necessarily the best point to make if you want to argue that your religion is free from violence or against violence. Mm-hmm. For example, it could be argued that Islam was inherently against certain things, such as female infanticide, killing your female children upon birth, or that it was against harsh treatments of slaves, because in the early times you see that the Islamic text is very severely opposed to the mistreatment, as you call it, of slaves, and the burying of girls, for example. And you could say, well, look, these people before Islam had some horrible things going on, but Islam was against that. Now, of course, there is some, you don't exactly know how what it really looked like, if there was really such a huge problem of female infanticide, if slavery was indeed such a horrible thing back then in comparison to Islam. But you could give that as evidence that Islam was opposed to these barbaric, bloodthirsty behaviors, and that it brought something good. But of course, David would not agree with that, and I wouldn't either, because we know that afterwards, Islam established an empire of slavery and caused the biggest slave trade in the history of humankind. And it also caused the biggest oppression of women in human history. And thereby, that is entirely in contradiction with the whole notion that Islam was against the harming of women or girls and against the mistreatment of slaves. So that is a little bit of fallacious reasoning, but I guess as supporting evidence, it could work.
Then a century of Christianity becoming a legal religion, Christians had the gladiatorial games abolished throughout the empire. Second, infanticide, killing unwanted babies and leaving them to die, or leaving them to die, was extremely common among the Greeks and Romans. Children born frail or with defects would be tossed in a river or left in the woods to die. Unwanted daughters would be tossed in a river or left in the woods to die. Christians condemned this practice in the first century. In the second and third centuries, when Christianity was still an illegal religion, Christians would collect abandoned babies and care for them. After Christianity was legalized, in 374, the Roman Emperor Valentinian outlawed infanticide and child abandonment. So moral reform spread as Christianity spread. Christianity had a similar impact on the concept of war. Christians developed what's now called just war theory. Just war theory deals with issues like, what are the appropriate grounds for waging war? How should enemy combatants be treated? Christians like Augustine in the 4th century and Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century applied Christian beliefs about love, justice, and responsibilities of human governments to theories about war. The developments continued into modern times and can be arranged into 3 categories. The Latin phrases are jus ad bellum, jus in bellum, and jus post bellum, which we can translate as right to war, justice in war, and justice after war. The principles of jus ad bellum, right to war, are directed towards those with the power to declare war, i.e. heads of state. The main requirement here is having a just cause to declare war, such as self-defense or protecting the victims of tyrannical leaders. Other requirements include just intent. War should only be fought for the right reasons. Last resort, all peaceful solutions should be considered first. And proportionality, the good outcome sought must outweigh the necessary bloodshed. Once war has been declared, the principles of jus in bellum, justice in war, come into focus, mainly dealing with the appropriate treatment of the enemy. The most essential features of jus in bellum are the immunity of non-combatants. A soldier may only target someone who is actively attempting some form of harm. Proportionality, the tactics used must be proportional to the desired outcome, and the fair treatment of captives. When war is coming to an end, the terms of peace should balance correcting the wrongs that led to the war with respecting the human rights of the defeated group. In general, jus post bellum, justice after war, calls for distinguishing between responsible and non-responsible parties and taking steps to ensure that the injustices that led to the war are not repeated. These principles were largely influenced by Christianity, but most of them had become relatively universal by inclusion in the Hague Conventions, the Geneva Conventions, the Geneva Protocols, and various UN resolutions. I should probably clarify here that when I talk about a Christian perspective on war, I'm not claiming that Christians have always lived up to these ideas. Very often they didn't. But this debate isn't about how Christians or Muslims screw up or how they deviate from Christianity or Islam. I'm giving a Christian perspective on war, and just war theory is a reasonable application of Christian values to the necessities of a dangerous world. Now, given Christian beliefs about humans being created in the image of God and loving others, even our enemies.
Hey, pause it real quick.
Having the authority.
Yep.
I just want everyone to know, if you have any questions or something, like, you're more than happy to super chat. I mean, that helps AP keep doing what he's doing. But yeah, there's just a lot there that he's talking about, and Christianity's understanding and government evolved. That wasn't something out the gate that Christianity, especially New Testament text, has. This is something that has developed over a long period of time. to end up finally developing what we call just war theory. So if you go back to the text, no, you don't. You have Christians being obedient to their government, but apart from that, they weren't like, here we have what we know of Islam. It rises with an empire, so it has a government political system as well as religious. It's kind of a both and. Whereas Christianity was just this kind of, if you will, small, exclusive sectarian type sect out the gate that ends up evolving and, of course, offshoots into various branches and versions of it. But most of all is peaceful, and they were martyrs as well. And the infanticide that he mentioned. I just want to make one point. One of the interesting things that pagans liked about Christianity, it was not uncommon to put an infant daughter or to like totally neglect a child. In fact, there were groups in Greek of children that that grew up on the streets without their parents. Their parents completely neglected them, and they had to grow up and were taken care of in their own little groups. They had their little enclaves of parentless people, bastard children. And Christianity adopted children that weren't even their own kids. Why? Because our Father in heaven adopted us, and this is their concept. And so pagans saw that, and this is an atheist speaking. I'm just telling you, like, they saw the morale and they saw the good it did and said, hey, you know, that's a very good thing that they're doing, and they wanted to participate. It started to attract people to the religion. It wasn't, here's a sword, this is going across your throat if you don't, you know, submit to this particular religion.
You're saying that as an atheist? Are you sure you're not a secret Christian?
I came out of Christianity. Look, there's a lot of good things that I could find in all of these religions, including Islam. I'm fairly certain that there are very good wisdom teachings and practical application for a lot of these things.
No, they're not.
Christianity,
I'm just kidding. Of course there are. Yeah, there's always good.
Christianity capitalized on that, though. They capitalized on adopting children in a time when that wasn't going on in the pagan world, and the pagans said, wow, there was kind of a mercy there for something that wasn't even theirs. And sure, there was adoption of children that weren't yours in the pagan world, but that common practice of infanticide was a thing. So
I have to tell you, though, if you say some good things about the morality of Christianity, there will be a lot of people here who will say, oh, you are just a secret Christian, so you have to deal with that from now on. I'm sorry.
Listen, go watch 900 videos, and most of them are against Christian New Testament and Old Testament Hebrew Bible, if you will. So yeah. They could say what they want, but you can go watch my channel and find out real quick how much of a Christian I really am. You know, it's like,
yeah. Okay. All right.
Authority to punish wrongdoers and the obligation to protect human rights. How should we view Islam? Well, Islam calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world. It calls for fighting unbelievers simply for being unbelievers. Christians and Jews can accept dhimmi status and live as second-class citizens. If we don't accept dhimmi status, we are to be fought until we're dead. Polytheists.
Very quick explanation to that. Dhimmi status is a status given to minorities that are conquered by the Muslims living thereby within the borders of the Islamic Empire, which is supposed to be an Islamic entity, Islamic state that is supposed to inherently exist within Islam. Muslims are supposed to invite people to Islam, groups of people to Islam. If they reject, they're supposed to give them the options of either fighting and dying, fighting and becoming slaves, or fighting and converting to Islam, fighting and becoming a lesser people. Whatever, you get the point. And in that, under those circumstances, if the Christians are defeated and the population becomes part of the Islamic caliphate, naturally you can't just kill them all and get rid of all of them, especially if we're talking about Christians and Jews and people who are of a religion that has a certain religious scripture. You are supposed to take a certain thing called jizya from them, which is protection money, in exchange for their right to live as inferior people in the Islamic lands, while having to hide their religion basically into their places of worship that are supposed to be very subtle and very lower even in physical height to mosques. When it comes to other minorities, historically there have been differences. Certain other minorities have been directly killed and threatened to just convert or else, because the whole law of dhimmi and jizya wasn't initially applied to all religions, only to those that are recognized as people of the scripture, meaning those Abrahamic beliefs or beliefs that have a religious scripture. later. But later on, Muslims also started applying that rule to different groups like Hindus, for example, because you can't just take over India and massacre the entire Hindu population. It's just not possible. But yeah, that's the concept he's talking about. And that is a fundamental Islamic concept that is not developed by people, by scholars. It is directly found in the Quran, chapter 9, verse 29, and also in many of the hadiths, the quotes of Muhammad.
And I'm assuming atheists have to convert to Islam or die. Needless to say, going around trying to subjugate the world because a false prophet told you to certainly wouldn't meet the requirements of a just war. And it shows utter contempt for human beings who are created in the image of God. So the Christian view would be that governments are supposed to protect people from jihadis. Muhammad commanded his followers to kill anyone who leaves Islam. Can you imagine being taught all your life that the Quran has been perfectly preserved and that it's filled with scientific miracles and that Muhammad was the perfect man, and then you decide to do some research for yourself and you find out that everything you've been taught is a lie? You leave Islam, but now you're under a sentence of death because you didn't ignore reality. If we're going to have any genuine respect for human beings in this world, we have to allow them to reject false prophets. No one should ever be killed for rejecting an obviously false prophet. Here again, the Christian view would be that governments should protect apostates whenever possible. Muhammad ordered.
Yeah, so the point is, take for example me. I'm an apostate. I was a Muslim at one point. I believed in it very firmly. I doubted it. I researched it. I tried to hold on to it with all my honesty. And in the end, I could no longer believe in it. So I left it. And then I started speaking out about it. And I started speaking out about the fact that I left Islam. And simply for this, I am supposed to be executed. This is, of course, completely against the basic human experience. You cannot possibly justify this from your point of view in any possible worldview that you couldn't come up with, or anything that is remotely coherent. So Islam has that specific rule, and Daniel Haqiqatjou will also confirm that later on.
So real quick though, textually speaking, if I go textual based on Christianity, you're not going to find executing of like a political execution of someone who doesn't believe and who apostatize. However, there are places that are not pretty. In Acts, we have, I can't remember the two names. I sent this on Pine Creek show, by the way. He did a review of some of the debate as well, and it was really fun. But the Holy Spirit, because they lied to the Holy Spirit, killed two people, a man and his wife, for lying to the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit kills people who lie, according to the book of Acts. I don't know. The historical veracity of that is disputed, but the point is that the story in the text is saying that throughout Christian history, because we're talking about Christianity. If you mean Christianity as in just these texts and maybe the first few centuries, okay, but I would not get away with the things I've said 300-400 years ago. If Michael Servetus was burned at the stake by someone, let's say like John Calvin, for just denying the Trinity, he was still theist. He still believed in Jesus. He did not believe in a Trinity. What would I get out of the Christian world by saying I don't believe in any of that? I think that it's not ontologically true at all. And I spoke out against it. Probably going to get burned. And then they're going to burn the ashes of my ashes and then spill those into the sea. And then who knows? So there's ugly on both sides.
As far as I understand it, from the last 1,000 years of Christian history, or 500 years ago in the average Western European Christian environment or nation, you would not. There wouldn't be a specific law that you deserve to be, tortured and killed simply for personally not believing. But if you went out there and started speaking out about that these beliefs don't make sense to you, that you want to change them, that you don't believe in it, or you start blaspheming, then you would be judged and you would probably be executed by the states, which was common in most Western common in most Christian states around the world. But when it comes to the fundamentals of the religion, in the fundamentals of the religion in Christianity, you cannot find such a command. And from the early Christians, you can see an opposition to violent rule against people who don't believe in general. If we go back, however, and you want to talk about the theology, and this is what Daniel will address later on, if you look at the Old Testament, you will find that it says in Deuteronomy and in several other places, I believe, that if one of you entices you to to believe in other gods, to believe in different gods, then you shall put him to death and have no mercy on him, or something like that, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh
But
no, you're 100% right.
Yeah,
There's
that's what it
clear
says.
places where Israel Bel worshippers, for example, Bel priest and whatnot. There's the Elijah story where Yahweh's fighting against, or at least it's the battle of the gods, as people call it, where Yahweh is going to fight Bel, and of course he pours all this water on the altar and then calls upon his God, and boom, flames. As soon as that happens, most people go, "Oh, the miracle," and they finish the story. They forget right after that they execute, according to the narrative, all of the Bel priests that were Israelites who followed a different god. So yeah, it was ugly. The difference is, I think, instead of practically grabbing a sword and doing it yourself, Christians seem to have said, God's going to get you. Like hell's coming. You're going to get God's going to punish you in his own way. And that kind of concept. So they threaten you with words and things like that rather than necessarily a sword. Eventually, though, they pick up the sword.
And the fundamental idea from the beginning was in Christianity that rules such as these were rules for the Hebrew people that God had a covenant with in the past, and Christians have a new covenant in which these laws no longer apply, except certain things such as the Ten Commandments, which are not considered the covenant. They are whatever it's called. I forgot the terminology. But laws like these, for example, to punish those who tell you to worship other gods, did apply to Hebrew people. And what Daniel does also is he doesn't try to do the typical approach and say, your Bible says this, so why don't you do that? He says, your Bible says this, so why do you complain about Islam? You could very well do that as well.
He's trying to create a consistency. He's trying, but Christianity is oil. It's mixing oil and water to the Hebrew Bible. Like, people, when you look at this critically, you're going to find out, sure, they're trying to connect the two, but it is an elbow. It is not the same. And there is a change that's taking place, a transition. This gets into highly technical stuff. So maybe we should keep going, because we're going to talk about the inclusion of Gentiles and how that affects Christianity, and maybe there's some influence here. Who knows? So
let me read a quick comment. Mr. Winter said in a super chat, I commend you on your stand against regressive Islam. Shameless plug, my book, In the Shadow of the Bear, available now on Amazon. My experience with religion is detailed and hopefully helps others. So on Amazon, Shadow of the Bear. Thank you. Thank you for the plug.
For that super chat.
And thanks for the super chat. Anyone else, if you want to add things, if you want to ask questions, make super chats. I will read them. I will go through them. Mr. Winter said, do you guys follow Ayaan Hirsi Ali's view of the Mecca-Medina dichotomy for Muslims? Is the Reformation people such as Majid Nawaz seek possible? We can address that in a bit.
Okay. His followers to kill people for making fun of him. But Muhammad initially thought that he was demon-possessed. He tried repeatedly to kill himself. He claimed to be a victim of black magic. He claimed that the devil tricked him into delivering false revelations. He had sex with a prepubescent girl. He married the divorced wife of his own adopted son after causing the divorce by lusting after her. He tortured a man for money. Critics should never be killed for pointing out the obvious.
Pause real quick. I just want to say this. I've heard Muslims dispute the whole prepubescent. I don't want to get stuck here, but I think Daniel's going to think this is a low blow. And like, dude, we're focusing on violence. And well, if you do any research on, prepubescent sex, okay, and you look into that, you're going to find out that this can have long-standing psychological, neurological, physiological damage, emotional damage. There's a lot of research out there, and what is actually conclusive evidence of what happens is disputed amongst the scientists out here that are studying this stuff. But at the end of the day, there are definite negative, if I can use it, violent implications on what happens to a young girl in that kind of state. So it is a valid point that he's bringing up about the whole violence to this, even though Daniel's going to say, man, you're bringing up things that aren't even on topic, but it is in a sense connected. So
yeah, Daniel would by no means deny that this is true, that Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl and united in marriage with her when she was 9 and had sex with her. He will admit to that, and he will also defend that as something nice and as a wholesome value. And he will try to deny that this is actually harmful, but completely wrong. We have an abundance of evidence, an abundance of medical evidence, psychological evidence that shows us very clearly that child marriage is harmful. It is physically harmful. It harms the reproduction reproductive system of girls. It harms them psychologically. It is terrible, and we have a lot of evidence to that. I could make a stream of just presenting evidence for that. Maybe I should. I don't know.
You should. I think maybe you should.
Yeah. All right.
Whenever possible. Muhammad allowed his followers to beat women into submission. The beatings were so bad during the time of Muhammad that Aisha, the mother of the faithful, said that she hadn't seen any woman suffering as much as Muslim women. According to Aisha,
this is a true hadith. It says directly, Aisha, the wife in question, says that the women of Medina after Islam, she never saw women that suffered more than they did. But yeah.
Muslim women were treated worse than pagan women. And we can see the results of Muhammad's teachings in countries around the world. But Muslim women are created in the image of God. They deserve better than this. In short, since the Christian perspective is that governments are supposed to punish wrongdoers and protect human rights, and since Islam promotes wrongdoing and violates human rights, it must be opposed. Now, Muslim apologists generally don't want Islam to seem more violent than Christianity, and they don't want Muhammad to seem more violent than Jesus. So what do? Well, there are three basic routes they typically go here, all of them grounded in misrepresentation. One, they point out that there's violence in the Bible, usually associated with the Mosaic covenants, 14 centuries before the New Covenant. There were commands to wage war against groups, and since God appeared to the Israelites in a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire, rained food on them, and was performing miracles, there were very harsh penalties for disobedience. But the Christian perspective on violence generally has to do with commands that are directed.
You know to pause that, right? You already know. I think that David is falling into a trap here himself.
Yeah.
You and me, I think, both agree. Sorry, David. This is definitely something that I think Daniel got him on, and in the sense, he's like, so if a fire, sure, if God revealed Himself and in some way proved it, I guess this somehow shows that it's okay as long as God's given the thumbs up, because this is what the book's teaching, or at least the collective of text. It's a library of books, but you see this here, and I just, at the end of the day, I guess David's going to say, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, he's going to say, well, we all deserve to be punished according to this God, so he can do whatever he wants, and if he says it's good, and we should do it. And that's what he ultimately comes down to. But I'm like, anyway.
Well, David told me before about his views on morality, and he has an extremely pessimistic view when it comes to humanity, and he basically says, in my opinion, God should just destroy us all because we are, humans are pieces of crap, we don't deserve it, and things like that. So his Christian belief gives him a sense of love for the sake of God, because there is meaning in it and all that. And the view is that since God was there back then and was guiding the people, exactly in the moment, he was telling them exactly what to do, what not to do, and disobeying God directly while seeing him had severe consequences, which are not comparable to just following the scripture and following the belief right now. That's what he is arguing. There may be lots of interpretations of that. I have seen lots of interpretations. You may be familiar with those, that the moral guides in the Old Testament merely serve as a backstory, a history of the Hebrew people, and this is not a law for all humanity that we are now supposed to abide by. But the point still stands. In the scripture, it says this happened, this was done, these terrible things did happen according to your beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, even if some of it's fictional or
enhanced,
the bottom line is it's not pretty. And for me, I like what Pine Creek said the other day. For those who haven't seen his review, definitely should after we watch this. Go watch Pine Creek's review. Pine Creek points this out all the time. If your God's real, catch this napkin on fire. I'll dip it in water and just pray right now, and boom, it'll catch on fire right here in my hands. The point is why didn't God just kill all these bad people? Why didn't he just knock them out? Why does he have to use humans? And if we look today and someone says in the name of God, they're going to conquer a nation or something, we're not thinking that whatever the God might be, let's just say they have a different God or whatever. If you're a Christian watching this and you're like, no, my God's real, their gods are fake. Well, if they say they're going in the name of their God to go kill somebody, wouldn't you go, hold on, prove that God's even real to begin with? They'd be okay with that. But when we start talking about this atheist,
there is not the nuance of here in what he's saying of looking at the whole situation as an outsider who is not guided by God and who does not see God, as a cloud or in the burning in the woods or anything like that. To those people, this is just simply unacceptable. You can't say, oh, well, God told you to kill us. Well, go ahead and kill us then. But the thing is, his point is that there is a difference in where you can clearly see that God is there and he's right there and he's communicating with you. You clearly know that it is him, and it's not just you. Everybody else around you sees him too, and he tells you to do specific things. Then you would follow him. I would follow him and I would do what he says. This is
and
not
I have a
comparable to
huge
scripture.
question mark on that whole if any of that even happened. We're assuming that these stories are actually true. So David is assuming that these things happened, and if that was the evidence he needed to know, hey, thumbs up, go ahead and kill these people. God said, look, he's right over there. Look, in this cloud that came down onto the tabernacle, and he's speaking, we can hear him, and blah blah blah. I guess at the end of the day, that's a huge assuming the conclusion's true to begin with type of thing. So
but that's the thing, the question is very complicated actually, and I would disagree with David. I would say personally, if I knew that that God is right there and he's speaking to me and is telling me, okay, go and kill these and these and these people because they did this and this and that, I would probably think, that sounds very messed up. I don't think I want to do that.
That's anachronistic, though. You're not in their shoes. So
but I don't know. Maybe it would be different if I was in their place, in their time, and had their beliefs.
Right.
And David has a different perspective because he has different beliefs. So, not sure. Yeah. All right.
Towards Christians, not with the commands of earlier covenants. And if Muslims have any serious problem with God's commands in the Torah, they should take that up with Allah, who says that he revealed the Torah. 2, Muslim apologists often twist and distort the teachings of Jesus to make them sound violent. Muslim apologists are free to do this, but they probably shouldn't tell us that they love and respect Jesus if they're misrepresenting and degrading him. 3, Muslim apologists often point to the actions of Christians who disobey Jesus or obviously don't take his teachings very seriously, as if these Christians represent Christianity. And this is sheer deception. Now, I'm not saying that Daniel is going to misrepresent Christianity in any of these ways. These are just things I've seen from most other Muslim apologists who misrepresent Christianity just as they misrepresent Islam. Daniel's setting himself apart from other Muslim apologists, so maybe we'll get something different.
You got it. Thank you very much, David, for that opening statement. And but
okay, there were certain points here. Okay, he said Muslims will make certain objections to prove that Christianity is just as bad or worse or whatever it is. The first one is God was there during those things in the Old Testament, so that's different. Secondly, he said Muslims will try to twist the words of Jesus or the words in the New Testament and will thereby lie about Jesus. They shouldn't then claim to also respect him. And he said they will bring up the atrocities of Christians in history, but that would be fallacious because Christians in history don't represent Christianity. I think it's fairly consistent because he also says, as far as I remember quite often, that he doesn't judge Muslims based on Islam based on the actions of Muslims, of terrorist organizations. He judges them because Islam is what gives them the ideas to do the terrible things that they do today or the terrible things that they have done in history. Is there anything that you want to say about any of this?
I just want everyone who's maybe keeping an eye on this to keep in mind that we're talking about Islam being 7th century or later, right? So when they're going to make claims about what Jesus did or didn't do, they're assuming, and I've heard this of Daniel, you're going to hear this later on as I watched the debate yesterday again. I've seen it twice now. He's going to make this point like your scriptures are corrupted. And then my big question mark, anyone with any just common sense should ask is, hold on. So if those are corrupted scriptures, what scriptures do you have? And do you have any evidence of these non-corrupted, if you will, uncorrupted scriptures in your possession? Or is there any evidence of them anywhere to compare and say, no, we have texts where Jesus had a sword and was going up against the government and stuff. Now, there is some theories. We're going to get into that. I suspect he's going to mention that Jesus was a potential, he doesn't say this explicitly, but a potential rebel leader who might have potentially led a revolt. But then he also, and I don't know if that's his conclusion, he also then says, well, that's not what Jesus came for. Jesus was teaching something different. So it's just kind of like, I came with a sword, not with. I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring sword. All right, and then it's like kind of like, well, he came to teach these things differently. That's why he looks like a different kind of prophet than Muhammad. So it's a really it's weird. It's hard to pin him down on what he actually thinks Jesus did, what he really said. Where is the text to know that you have uncorrupted versions of the Torah, the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament? Show me where that is. It's like saying the argument about the Kaaba. It's like, no, it was there. Where's the evidence of that? Well, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, is the argument they're trying to make. And it's like, no. If there's nothing to begin with, why are we assuming this to be the case anyway?
Yeah, he will try to argue that he somehow has the accurate interpretation of the Torah or of Jesus, of the history, and that Christians kind of corrupted their beliefs, that Christians and Jews corrupted their scripture. He later comes to that whole argument. We talked about that. Where David actually says, Muhammad says, according to the Hadith, pointing at a Torah, I believe in you and the one who revealed in you, and that clearly implies that the Torah that he points at is a true Torah that Allah revealed, and Muhammad believes in that book and in the one who revealed that book. But Daniel then objects to that and says, we don't know what exactly was in that Torah. And that's a very a very dumb objection, because a Torah that Muhammad would have in his own time would not be very different from a Torah that we have today.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, without a doubt. And that's why I look to scholarship. I go to the scholars instead of going to apologist. I would, for example, no offense, I wouldn't go to David Wood to learn about Christianity. I mean, sure, you can listen to him, but David Wood is an apologist. He is literally there to defend and prove his view. I would go to critical scholarship, even if they have ontological conclusions of Christianity, or if they're not a Christian. Dale C. Allison Jr. recently interviewed him. He's a Christian at conclusion, but he admits contradictions, problems, this, that. Get the super chats, because there's so much good stuff we're going to get into with Daniel.
Yeah, Sojkovic said hello, AP, and also say hello to Mrs. Apostate, Apostate kids, and of course the Apostate dog. Oh yeah, we have a nice dog. Hope you're well. Thank you so much. I think you guys heard him bark earlier. He was very loud.
Who let the dogs out?
He gets so mad when the mailman comes and drops something off. He's like, what the hell is going on here? What is this? Leave me alone. But thank you so much, Sojkovic. I appreciate it. M. Doug said, if you think about it, God only went peaceful for a few hundred years in the 6,000 between Adam and Muhammad. Must have had herbs in his volcano.
I don't know. Okay. Whatever's smoking, whatever this.
Thank you so much, M. Doug, for that input. I appreciate it. Leek said, couldn't a person just reply back to the objection? If God uses other animate objects to judge, like animals, why can't God use human agents? Couldn't the person just reply back to the objection? Why am I not getting this? If God uses other animate objects to judge, like animals, why can't God use human agents? What is this in reference to? I don't understand.
Maybe, and I'm guessing here, maybe where God uses bears to eat little children in the story of Elisha, or lions. There's some stories where animals are used to go and like kill off humans or something like that. Why couldn't he use other humans? All I'm saying, and this is the thing, God could do whatever he wants if there is a God, and that's really what he wants to do. I would think he's probably an evil God at this point, though, for doing these things, but that's because I don't start with humans are dung and they deserve eternal hellfire from being born, and they're despicable germs, if you will, like just to the point there's nothing that, that kind of view, and God has to save that. Like that's not where I start with it. But at the end of the day, if animals can be used to judge, we're asking the question to begin with, like, what God? Show me that first. Like, we need to know that, there's so many of them. What version is correct? And if they're telling people to go kill other people, is that really the man thinking that? Or is that really the God who's thinking that?
Yeah. That's the issue. And we could always endlessly discuss about what God really wants from us if we can establish that God is indeed real and that he does indeed communicate with us. But that's a whole different discussion. Yeah. So I believe so. Earlier there was a question by Mr. Winter, said, do you guys follow Ayaan Hirsi Ali's view of the Mecca-Medina dichotomy for Muslims? Yeah, there is a there always has been a difference in interpretation in terms of Muhammad's history, where in the earlier verses of the Quran, he was in Mecca and he was weak and powerless, and verses that are more peaceful and more uniting came into existence during that time, whereas in his later period, after he fled to Medina and established his Islamic State, the Quran became incredibly ruthless, and that's when he rose to power and became the guy that he is today. And yeah, I mean that's a very fairly commonly known narrative, which I am in agreement with. Is the Reformation people such as Majid Nawaz seek possible? I don't think it's possible, but it's a very long discussion to have. All right. Thanks for the super chats, guys. Let's move on to Daniel Pikachu's opening statement.
If it's your first time here, folks, want to let you know, first, welcome. We're glad you're here no matter what walk of life you are from. And also want to let you know we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics here at Modern Day Debate. And with that, thrilled to have you here as well. Daniel, the floor is all yours.
By the way, Daniel, Modern Day Debate is... James is looking for Muslim debaters who will debate people like me. Unfortunately, he cannot find Muslim debaters because Muslims apparently don't want to debate, and he's very desperate about that. So please, if there are experienced Muslim debaters, get in touch with James. He is looking for you.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Thank you to Modern Day Debates for hosting, and thanks to David, and thank you to everyone watching. The debate today is about violence and intolerance, Christianity versus Islam. Let me say right off the bat that yes, Islam has violence and Islam is not tolerant of every belief and way of life. And that's a good thing, as I'll explain. But my problem with David Wood and other Christian apologists is that they are inconsistent and dishonest. I'm going to focus on three main examples of this inconsistency. The first is what we can call the Old Testament question. Imagine there was a hadith that described Muslim soldiers coming back from battle and reporting to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The soldiers report that they were victorious in battle and had killed all the enemy men. Then the Prophet ﷺ asked sternly, what about the women and children? Were they also killed? The soldiers say, no, we didn't kill them. Then imagine that the Prophet ﷺ gets enraged at this and condemns the soldiers for not exterminating all the women and children. Now imagine that if a hadith like this existed, David Wood would have no hesitation in citing it over and over again on his channel, making a big deal about it, denouncing Islam for it, and generally characterizing Muhammad ﷺ as an evil, bloodthirsty man. But the reality is there is no such hadith. Instead, this is what we read in the Bible about Moses. In Numbers 31, verse 14 to 18 of the Bible, we read Moses was angry.
I just want everyone to know they're cutting the legs off. Literally, both legs are getting cut off here. It's an interesting thing as third party looking in. What he's saying here is the same thing when you look at the Hebrew Bible and you find out infant sacrifice was taking place. People were literally burnt offerings of their children in antiquity. How common, we don't know. Actually, in fact, we could bring Dr. Joshua Bowen in on this particular subject matter.
Can we have him here?
Yeah. Let me let him know so he can pop on. Jump in.
That would be fun.
So just the interesting thing when you look at this is, and he's the digital Hammurabi guy, right? So the Hammurabi Code, ancient Near Eastern law, is very similar to what we find within the Hebrew Bible, the Torah. And you find a lot of common laws that are there. To me, it's not crazy why in the 7th century they would not have women and children being slaughtered and killed. Okay. Morals develop over time. People are like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Nope, we're going to do that. Canaanites were practicing things, and a lot of scholars are suggesting the Israelites were Canaanites. They were practicing a lot of things, including infant sacrifice, supposedly. And here the Bible's trying to do an elbow and say, no, we don't do that. Can you imagine if an apologist living in the 1200s BC, let's say, was trying to defend Judaism, say, listen, you Canaanites were sacrificing infants, and we're not doing that now, but we're still using a lot of the things you guys were already teaching into our literature, and we're borrowing a lot of the same God's names, even Yahweh, things like that. So there's a lot of interesting things we could bring up. Is he in the chat yet?
I don't see him yet. I don't know. I don't see him.
So this is, it seems...
He said he would be listening and could jump in at some point. I don't know.
It seems like he's saying what you said earlier. The Torah is a thumbs up according to Muhammad, but the Torah he's talking about isn't the Torah that says kill women and children, I guess. Is that what Daniel's position is? It
is complicated. At this point, he only says so far that that this is what the Old Testament says, that this is what your scripture says.
Mhm.
Later on, I don't exactly remember the context, how they get to it. He brings up the idea that the Torah was corrupt. And okay, what happens later on is that David says Muslims shouldn't be complaining about the Old Testament because, according to their own beliefs, Allah revealed the Old Testament as well. Daniel says, I'm not complaining about it. I'm merely pointing out your hypocrisy. But even then, we don't exactly know if the Torah was exactly that, because there may be a lot of bad things in the Torah that were not originally there, because
Right.
people corrupted it. And David then says, how can that be true when Muhammad himself pointed at it and said, I believe in you and the one who revealed you? And Daniel then stupidly says, we don't know if that was the Torah that we have today, which makes no sense.
Yeah, this is oh man. So okay, I don't know if you want to keep going, and then we'll pop Dr. Josh on whenever he shows up.
We could. Oh, he's here.
Is he
Wait, he's right here.
the man with the plan?
Yeah. Wait a minute. Hello, Josh.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well.
Listen, I'm on Jeopardy now, and I've got a call a friend question here, and if I get
You
it
called
wrong,
the
we
wrong
won't-
person, man.
How would we phrase this question, AP? Because it seems he's pointing at the wicked, horrible things happening here and saying, if the prophet went and did this, yeah, Christians would definitely say something, especially David would. I expect that. He would say that. But I think Daniel's trying to say, be consistent. Why aren't you saying that about your own prophet Moses? Your own, and he's right in this. I'm telling you, this is why I agree with Daniel on this. But about the whole idea of, and you would disagree with maybe AP, that's fine. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I think he's right in why Christians are looking to the Old Testament. So Dr. Josh, who wrote the book, The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, specifically goes through some of these, what we today would call atrocities or horrible things, but it's not just that. You know, he goes into other really good history. How do we phrase it?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you specifically want to, Josh? Did you listen to the whole thing that we just talked about, the whole conversation that we were having?
I've kind of been in and out. So
Okay.
probably
okay.
should refresh me.
So the thing is, what we're talking about is David is proposing that Christianity is peaceful and loving and forgiving, whereas Islam is intolerant, hateful, and violent. Daniel, Haqiqatjou here, does not disagree that Islam is indeed hateful and violent.
Mind you, this is a Muslim who's saying this,
yeah,
so it's not like an anti-Muslim or an Islamophobe or something that's saying this. This is somebody who is a Muslim.
The Muslim apologist proudly agrees that Islam is, violent and all that. But he says that is not a problem. You should not be complaining because your Old Testament is also violent and hateful and disgusting and this and that. Upon which David says, I don't know why you're complaining about the Old Testament because according to your Islamic belief, Allah himself also revealed the Old Testament. Upon which Daniel says, we don't exactly know that because the Old Testament was corrupted. Upon which David says, but your prophet Muhammad said, I believe in you and the one who revealed in you in the 7th century. And Daniel then responds, we don't exactly know if that was the Torah that we have today. But
and then he says Western scholarship will tell you about that. He literally depends on Western scholarship for this. But anyway,
what do you say about this whole debacle?
Well, I mean, obviously, I have no expertise in anything about Islam. So, I mean, from just what you've said and the things that I've heard back and forth in the debate so far, I mean, it's absolutely true that what the critique that he's leveling, utilizing a passage like Numbers 31, I think is a fair critique, right? And it's one that I think Christian apologists have to deal with quite a bit because it's absolutely clear, and I think he's correct that if such a passage existed in any other text, that a Christian apologist would be very quick to to cite it, to jump on it, and they're reticent, I think, to put it lightly, to do so, in their own text. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, which is a very important sense, this is what the Hebrew Bible is describing, right? I mean, it's describing the endorsement of slavery. It's describing what we would consider to be rape in passages, like Numbers 31, like Deuteronomy 21, and 22. I mean, these are like specifically 21, but I mean, these are things that I think are pretty clear among consensus scholarship.
And to put it in simple terms, though, AP, is this: I'm not in any way saying David is somehow condoning it. In fact, he's trying to draw a different conclusion than what we're finding in the Hebrew Bible. He's not even trying to justify that. He's trying to say we're in a different, that was a different time. He's trying to divorce them. And Daniel's saying, but look, you're not looking at your prophet Moses, who was doing these things, or other prophets, and saying what you're saying against my prophet. So he's trying to make the point that you Christians use this Bible that has all of these things that you were just listing and much more as holy script, but you don't practice those things anymore, but you still think it's holy script. And you're not doing protest against Moses every Friday and talking crap about Moses. You're doing that against my prophet, but you're not doing it against your own book that says these things. And that is where I agree the inconsistency, even though I understand as a Christian how we try to harmonize and try to, I say we because that's what I was. You see where I'm going with it.
Okay, here's the thing. Here is where the problem is, and where the where the issue comes in, where Islam is different. Daniel Haqiqatjou brings up the whole idea that it is hypocrisy that such stuff is found in the Old Testament, but David doesn't seem to complain about it while he's complaining about Islam. The problem is it is very different. David is here saying. He's not denying that these things are found in the Old Testament. He's not justifying them. He's saying those things must be judged based on a completely different standard. They are not part of our moral judgment today. They are not part of the topic. Whereas when we look at the Islamic scripture and what Islam commands you to do, what Muhammad commands, these things are not an old covenant. They are not history. They are not a story that we listen to. They are directly taught to be by Muslims, fundamentally taught to be universal, timeless commands that are not only applicable in Muhammad's own time, but also applicable today. And Daniel Haqiqatjou acknowledges that these things are applicable today. He acknowledges that Muhammad says, kill those who leave Islam, and that is still applicable today. He acknowledges that Muhammad takes slaves and uses them for sex, and that is still applicable today, if the circumstances are provided. Whereas with the Old Testament, these are things that belong to an old covenant, where David says, those are different standards. This is not the same issue. You might say, okay, it is hypocritical to complain about the morals of Islam while not complaining about the Old Testament, but that is besides the point, because Islam commands these things for today, whereas the Old Testament simply tells these things for a completely different time that concerns none of us.
Dr. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I thought, actually, listening to it. We have to be careful to make a distinction between, what a text or a group of texts meant, or what writers intended, if we can get to such a thing in their original context, and how people have developed theologies based on them. And there's a very clear distinction that we need to draw there. So Ridvan, as you're saying, how someone interprets an ancient text through a theological lens can make a tremendous difference. So if somebody says, I interpret these stories in the Old Testament as like metaphors, or as many Christian apologists would do, this is part of the Old Covenant, something that's not applicable to us today, different situation. whether they're right or wrong about their assessment of the original context historically is in some ways irrelevant when it comes to their theological positions. So if their theology dictates, no, we love our enemy, no, we do good to those who persecute us, it really doesn't, in that sense, it really doesn't matter what it is that the Hebrew Bible says, or their Old Testament says, in the sense that theologically speaking, they're following. I guess the simple way to say this is they're following their theological models more than they're following the texts that stand behind their theological models.
I
think
agree.
that's an important distinction.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said, AP. And from the Christian worldview, of course, if you're in the new covenant and from that day forward, anyone who's coming on repeating similar actions we may find in that Hebrew Bible Old Testament text that we're saying, hey, that's behind us. Yeah, I get it. So they're going to go, no, that's not, we're love our enemies, that kind of stuff. And I totally agree with you. I'm just pointing out, this is the reason Marcion came on the scene and said, hold on, you're telling me the God who commanded the death of women and children in 1 Samuel 15 and all of these other atrocities that you've talked about a lot, Dr. Josh, this is why he says that can't be the God of Jesus. He's like, the God of Jesus is love. That does not equate love. And this is where Marcionism and splits within Christendom happen and all. But that's going into a different rabbit trail. I'm just pointing out, even a Christian,
and these are like Dr. Josh says, these are like deep theological interpretations, and you can make a lot of them on this matter.
Oh, I'm just saying historically.
But
there were
they
different
would be
Christians.
The thing is, they would be kind of besides the point of this debate, for example, which is about whether Christianity is tolerant or hateful or violent, and whether Islam is hateful or violent. You could now say, oh, it's hypocritical of you to complain about Islam because the Old Testament says this and this and that. And you could argue about why the Old Testament says this and this and that. But the point is, Christianity itself fundamentally does not teach that you should be violent and hateful. Christianity itself does not command violence. Christianity tells you to love and forgive. That's what he says. So these things that you complain about and that are present within Islam are not found within Christianity, no matter how much you find that it is internally inconsistent.
The only connection I can make is that the triune God, right? This comes down to Jesus was the one commanding, or with his Father.
Yeah.
So that's where the theological little, it's like saying Jesus said in 1 Samuel 15 and was mad at Saul for not killing every man, woman, and child. Because if he is
but again,
God,
that would be a theological debate,
But that's exactly what Daniel's trying to point out. He's trying to say, you're saying he's God. God back here said, that means Jesus said, and we're going to get to that, I guess. So
yeah, I mean, if I could give like a modern, and this is going to be not a perfect analogy by any means, because I don't think I give perfect analogies ever, but
it's okay.
Like if there was a group of people, as I'm sure there is, that really loves the Iron Man movies, and they would go around talking about how, boy, we really can learn a lot from Iron Man, and how we should try to develop in such a way that we don't rely on these external things to make us who we are, but to rely on our character and our convictions and our who we are as people to identify as that, as opposed to this because that's what happens in Iron Man, right? Iron Man starts off as Iron Man is the suit, he's not the person, but that develops by the end of the third movie, much from a literary standpoint, into Iron Man very much is Tony Stark as opposed to the suit. But for someone to come along and say, well, now wait a minute, there's inconsistency in your movies, right? Because look, here in Iron Man 1, even the weakest, most rudimentary suit is so much more indestructible in the first movie. I mean, nothing can blow it up, nothing can hurt it. I mean, it can withstand so much. But then by the end of the third movie, boy, it seems like almost anything can blow up one of these suits. There's not consistency here. That's while that might be a valid criticism on a internal what's the word that I'm thinking of here, or forgetting about it, but this internal consistency.
Right. The theme.
Yeah, but I mean, like, somebody that's supposed to pay attention to this sort of thing, maybe they missed something, maybe, but it wasn't it's not such an important feature,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And so to criticize it on that level would be to miss the point,
Yeah.
I think. And I think that's probably what David's response is trying to get at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
there was a that's the point. That's what I think the problem here is, and that's why at the beginning I pointed out that Daniel Haqiqatjou, the Muslim apologist here, was the one who originally proposed the topic violence and tolerance in Christianity and Islam, and David then comes in and says Christianity is not violent, Islam is, and here is why. Then as a response to that, Daniel Haqiqatjou suddenly comes in and says, why are you complaining? The Old Testament says this and this and that. And that is that is an interesting debate, right? It's an interesting conversation to have. It's an interesting theological discussion to have, definitely. But what exactly does it do to the point?
Dude, I think we should keep Dr. Josh in here and continue, and then because I really want to get more Daniel. Let Daniel speak more if possible. This is, you know what I mean?
One thing to quickly clarify, Josh, since you know these things very well. The one point that we briefly mentioned, David brings up at one point the idea that Muhammad says to a Jew who stands before him in the 7th century, he points at the Torah. By Torah, he may be referring to the whole Hebrew Bible or to the Torah specifically, and says, I believe in you and the one who revealed you. But Muslims believe, and this is a belief that kind of developed over time, that the Torah was at some point corrupted by the Jews far in the past, and therefore the stuff that we find in the Torah nowadays is not legitimate. That was not revealed by Allah. But in the Hadith, in the authentic reports, Muhammad clearly says, "I believe in you and the one who revealed you," about the Torah. Daniel Haqiqatjou says, as an objection, we don't know if the Torah he was pointing at is the Torah that we have today, implying that the Torah that Muhammad pointed at might have been completely different from the Torah that we have today. It might have been, fundamentally worlds apart in terms of its content. Is that possible, do you think?
Can I add one caveat to that real quick, just to say, I think he's saying all that too to the women and children being slaughtered in First Samuel 15. This is all trying to point out, well, the God that he said he believed in that was inserted by Jews later to kill the women and children, because he then makes the argument about the Talmud and the Mishnah and arguments that modern Jews even today are using the term Amalekite for Gentiles and atheists and things like that they'll eventually destroy, as if they're in this constant war since this text all the way till today. And he says that was inserted by Jews. I think that's what he's trying to say.
So is it possible that a Torah in the 7th century was something that is completely different in content from what we have today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how. So, I mean, to be upfront and clear about this, this is probably a better question for somebody like Dr. Kip Davis, who's a Dead Sea Scrolls specialist, who'd be able to comment on this far more extensively. But I mean, as far as, looking at something like the Masoretic text tradition that we have, from 1100 to 1000 AD, or CE, and comparing it back to the manuscripts that we have from Qumran, while there are obvious differences, and again, this is where Kip could, I think, go into great detail about this.
I'll hook you up
there's tremendous continuity. So the idea that, I mean, again, I don't know specifically what the quote is about and what, how that word is used, by, in that context, as Muhammad was saying it. But, as far as the timeline is concerned, I don't see how, from a text critical standpoint, it seems very unlikely that there would be such a drastic distinction, particularly at that stage of the game with the Masoretic text tradition having been underway for so long.
Yeah.
Good point.
Thank you so much. That is already very much useful and appreciated. Thank you, and we should discuss this topic further on a separate occasion, because this is actually a big argument that Muslim apologists try to make for Islam, claiming that the old Abrahamic texts, the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible, were corrupted, which is why we cannot take these texts as authoritative and as authentic. And they mostly say this because if you look into those scriptures and accept the idea that it was indeed the same God who revealed those scriptures, then you can't possibly conclude that Islam is true, because they are in great contradiction to the Quran, in huge contradiction to Islam, which is why they try to explain that those scriptures were somehow corrupted before the emergence of Islam, which, as far as I understand it, as far as I've seen it, is not really possible. But yeah. All right.
If it was corrupted back then. That's all.
Okay.
Say. Like not 7th century AD, but so they were already handed a corrupted version. This is probably apologetic polemics back against guys like you.
Yeah. Josh, do you want to stay here and keep talking to us about this stuff?
Yeah, I've probably got a few more minutes before I got to run. But so I can watch a little bit of the video.
Okay, let's move on.
Angry with the officers of the army, Moses said to them, "Have you let all the women live? Now kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known man by lying with him. But all the young girls who have not known man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. Kill all the women and children, but keep the virgin girls for yourselves as sex slaves." That's what the Bible claims Moses said. So I want to ask David Wood, do you think that Moses was an evil, bloodthirsty man? Are you going to denounce Moses in this debate? Because I don't see how you can denounce the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when you have the example of Moses getting angry because his soldiers are not killing enough women and children. There's nothing like that in the Quran or Hadith or in the Islamic tradition more broadly. The fact of the matter is, when we look at the content of Mosaic law in the Old Testament, it contains stoning, it contains expansionist war, it contains destroying the idols of pagan religions, it contains slavery, it contains all the things that Christians criticize Islam for, and it even goes beyond Islam in advocating killing women and children. So if Islam, Muhammad, and the Quran are evil because of these practices, then Mosaic law, Moses, and the Old Testament are at least as evil.
It's very funny to me. He's trying to make a distinction there between the horrible narrative in the Old Testament and what Islam presents, while also acknowledging that a lot of the stuff that David complains about is indeed part of Islam. Here are a few things that are actually part of Islam. Muhammad did wage many wars against the people in his surroundings. He did exterminate an entire tribe, killed all of their men, and men by definition is anyone who has pubic hair down there. Anyone above that is killed. All the others, children and women, are taken as captives, as slaves, and distributed. 1/5 of the booty, of the war booty, is taken by Muhammad, and the rest is distributed to his to his Muslim warriors, including slaves, female slaves that may be used for your sexual pleasure as you wish. So this is something that is indeed part of Islam. You have eradications of entire tribes. You have Muhammad's commands that this is what they should do, that this is how they should go forward in the future. You have Islamic history that goes on with exactly that practice, exactly with that strategy and that distribution of war booty. So yeah, these are things that do exist in Islam. I guess he's really trying to just say here, okay, there's something that is worse in the Old Testament, so how dare you complain about Muhammad and Islam?
Oh man, Josh, did you want to? I was going to say just one comment if I can, and then I'd love to hear Josh's thoughts. He'll probably piggyback off the things. What I'm saying, I've learned also from him and other scholars. At the end of the day, what ends up happening though, AP, is this: you have Christians who want to say, no, Daniel's lying. It wasn't sex slavery. It wasn't chattel slavery. It wasn't killing men, women, and children. You misunderstand your Bible. I've been seeing it through the chat countless times already in this interview. And I'm going to tell you something. They really should look at scholarship and not their local apologist on trying to find out what the Hebrew Bible is actually saying. Yes, Daniel's right. this was an ugly time. There were a lot of these things happening. And when you compare it to the ancient Near East, it's absolutely in line with the rest of what was happening in all of the civilizations during these times. This is what you learn in scholarship. I have Christians who are scholars, who me and Dr. Josh have both interviewed, who admit these things. It's the Christians who want to try and change the meaning of them because they are ugly, and they want to go, well, the Old Testament is justice and this and that, but it's not what you say it is. It's not that ugly. Yes. And that's what Daniel's trying to point out. And then he's trying to compare Islam next to it and go, really? You have a book that you call sacred. We have something not even as bad as that, trying to say we still have violence. We still do these horrible things, but not even as bad as that. So anyway, Dr. Josh.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is when you start mixing in theological concepts and theological superstructures, models that are interpreting the data, things become very, very complicated, very nuanced. But if what we're talking about is, at its bottom, what is it that the biblical text is saying? I mean, I think he's absolutely correct. This is what the text is describing. Mm-hmm. Right. So,
thanks to those in the chat who just aren't listening to anything you're saying, by the way, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, it's fine. And this, look, I mean, this is exactly, what I encounter
every
fairly
day.
often. Yeah. And I get it, right? Because if you're coming at this and viewing the text through a theological lens, as I did, then you already have a nuanced view. And what that tends to do is you overlay your interpretive model over the data and reinterpret the data based on your interpretive model. And instead of letting the data drive your model, I think that happens quite often. But the reality, as you say, Derek, is that, something like slavery, for example, and there's just absolute consensus on this. It doesn't really matter what kind of a scholar you talk to. If you talk to a biblical scholar or an Assyriologist, a Near Eastern scholar, be they conservative, quote unquote, or liberal alike, they're going to say, yes, there's chattel, sex, slavery. I mean, that's what you have in the text. Now, what they do with that is to, as you say, I think that so often people want to utilize that to demonize the Hebrew Bible or the ancient Israelites. And I think that's a bad move, right? I think that's incorrect to do, in the sense that if you're going to demonize, Israel of, the Iron Age Israel, then you're going to have to demonize everybody in the ancient Near East. And I don't think I think that's a very unfair position to take. I think we have to be able to say, look, we've morally developed over 2,500 years.
To put it simply, AP, can I just say this clearly? What he's trying to say is the way you're describing Islam as a timeless command from God to do these things. If we did that with the Hebrew Bible, understanding it's like what is going on, and compared it to all, not just the terrible Israelites. Yes.
It would be terrible. I get that.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
I mean, if I could just real quick, and then I'll probably duck out.
Okay.
But John Collins up at Yale Divinity School recently wrote a book on this. I think it's maybe 2 years old now. Brilliant. I would highly recommend it to anybody that's interested in this topic. And it's called, like, what are biblical values? And basically, the book is concerned with what would happen if somebody sat down to say, okay, we're going to utilize the biblical text, both the Old and the New Testament, and we're going to build our value system, our morality, based on what it says. We're just going to use it and build it. Well, you'd get a very different system from what Christianity holds to today. You just would. And so what Christians today are doing, and I'm very thankful that they do this, is that they are reinterpreting or creating interpretive models that are based on our developed morality, our progressed
Mhm.
morality today, and saying, well, of course, we know that slavery is wrong. And so how do we look at these passages in Leviticus 25 and Exodus 21 and say, how do we understand these things based, in light of the fact that we know that slavery is wrong? But I think that it's incredibly important for everybody to start with the basic data points that are, yeah, I mean, in the ancient Near East, slavery was a thing. Everybody did it. And so trying to say that the Hebrew Bible is somehow special in this sense and that slavery wasn't really slavery is dangerous. And the reason that it's dangerous, and then I'll go, and I've said this before though, is that when you start with the idea that this is the inspired, inerrant word of God, and therefore we have to make what it says timeless from a moral standpoint, you begin to excuse things and you start ending up with positions that unfortunately lead you down the path of opening yourself up and opening the people that follow these positions back up to slavery coming back. Right? Because you say things like, well, I mean, Exodus 21, 20, 21. I mean, it's saying that you have to be able to beat your slave, right? Because how else will you motivate them? And so it's not really. And so you got to be able to. How else are people going to pay off their debts? Well, you start talking like that. It's not a big leap to saying, well, debt slavery is not so bad. I mean, maybe we could have debt slavery, right? And we need to be like. Very, very careful when we have these conversations to say debt slavery bad, chattel slavery bad, right? We cannot go back to this. We have to understand it in its actual historical
Uh-huh.
And
context.
AP saying that
Mhm.
for Islam as well. So we're trying to equally distribute this criticism.
Yeah, the thing is, I said this before, and it is very strange. Some Muslim apologists try to kind of cut that out, what I said in the past, and trying to make it look like I was somehow being hypocritical or inconsistent. But I have said this before, and I say it now as well. If we were simply talking about Islam as, a historical thing, something of its own time, if we were only talking about the things that Muhammad did without talking about it as a universal, timeless moral code, then I wouldn't be sitting here and judging Islam as horrible. I wouldn't be sitting here and say that I fight this. I wouldn't be sitting here and criticizing Muhammad over this stuff, because what I would say is, in Muhammad's own time, he was born into a culture of slavery. And in his own time, by his own standards, that was justifiable. It would be stupid of me to sit down here and to say, how dare Muhammad do these, and these things? He didn't know that they were wrong because he was born into that culture where these things were done. The problem with it is that Muhammad did not only participate in those certain things that were common in his culture, he developed them and he turned them into a religion that people like Daniel Haqiqatjou here nowadays preach to us as a moral code for all times and all humanity. And that is the problem. That is simply unacceptable.
Dr. Josh, love you, man, and definitely want to see you soon. Dr. Kip Davis just chatted about the Torah thing. I'm sharing it real quick. Just show that image real quick before we continue. I just want to show everybody what he says in your chat, by the way, in the live chat.
Oh, wait a minute.
You see it?
Yeah.
There you go. He says, my apologies. I'm a few minutes behind on the question of the existence of a non-corrupted Torah that differs substantially from what we have today in the 7th century. It is basically implausible.
There you have it.
So there's another PhD in Dead Sea Scrolls validating.
And he knows, I mean, like exponentially more about that than I do. I just wanted to say,
I should invite him.
like, yeah, he's definitely a phenomenal scholar. But if people in the chat are, and I can't see it, but if people in the chat are, actually concerned that maybe I'm saying things about slavery in the Hebrew Bible, for example, that are inaccurate, please feel free, if you go to you could probably search it just on Google or on Amazon or something, but type in Joshua Bowen, Bowen, and I wrote a book called Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery? And the whole point of the book is to place slavery in the Hebrew Bible into its wider ancient Near Eastern context and to show you what is it that the Hebrew Bible says and what was going on in the ancient Near East and how do they compare with one another. And it's, it's meant to be an easy read. So I would just, if you think that I'm wrong about that, or go to our go to our YouTube channel, Digital Hammurabi, Hammurabi, and we have a whole series of videos for free that you could watch on the topic. But guys, thank you for having me on, and thank you for letting me.
I will put the
talk
link into the
for so
description. Digital Hammurabi, please visit that, everybody. I hope to have you back again, Josh, for
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
certain issues. I want to make some series with you again. We talked about that before. But yeah, everybody visit Digital Hammurabi, search Dr. Joshua Bowen. Very interesting stuff. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you very much. You guys take care.
You too.
man.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Now, before we proceed, I want to quickly bring up one specific report from our dear friend Mohammed here, just to have some very nice context here. So in this hadith here, which people have been mentioning in the chat too, thanks for the reminders, it says, it is narrated by Sab Jithma that he said, I'm sorry, I just don't have the patience right now to pronounce that properly. That he said to the Prophet, Messenger of Allah, we kill the children of the polytheists during the night raids. He said, they are from them. The Prophet Muhammad said, they are from them. If the language is a little bit unclear because it's a dumb translation, I would say, what he's basically saying is, this guy is saying, hey, during our raids, we kill the women and children too. And what Muhammad says in response to that is, well, they are of them, so no big deal, no issue.
Interesting.
This is the great moral character of Muhammad. So just to clarify that.
Look, I recognize that Christians will say that Moses is not the ideal and that Jesus is the true model of Christian values, but that response misses the point. The point is that traditional Christianity does not view Moses as evil. In fact, Moses has always been highly regarded by both Christians and Islam. Yet Christians like David Wood don't view Moses as an evil warmonger, but they do say these things about Muhammad. Why this blatant double standard? But the problem gets even worse for Christians. This is because obviously
actually, after the emergence of Islam, you have sources, early Christian sources from the 8th, 9th century that criticize Islam and criticize it specifically and explicitly about its barbaric nature and the violence and hate within it. So this is something that this is a criticism that is raised immediately after the emergence of Islam by Christian scholars already way back then, over 1,000 years ago. And the reason, as Daniel Haqiqatjou seems not to understand, why Christians don't criticize Moses on the same level is, as said, that these are entirely different standards. You could now call out the hypocrisy of that and say, hey, Moses did these according to an old covenant based on God's commands so many thousand years ago. But hey, that's entirely besides the point. And that is incomparable, which is, of course, not understandable from Daniel Haqiqatjou's moral point of view, but it's incomparable to what we have with Islam, where we have a universal, timeless moral code, which directly commands you to hate, to dehumanize, and to kill.
Moses didn't just make up the law, he was only conveying the commandments of God Almighty. So if stoning, expansionist war, and slavery are evil, then the God of the Old Testament was evil. Is David Wood going to denounce the God of the Old Testament?
Pause this. Dude, this is what I'm talking about. I just want to say, this debate was happening in the early Christian church. People keep mentioning orthodoxy. I've seen that through the chat too. Like, no, there was no orthodoxy. Of course, orthodoxy will argue. They'll try to say, well, we go right back to Peter. Peter had the keys, the whole nine. Get to critical scholarship, you'll see that's a different story. It's not that whole narrative of we have apostolic succession from so-and-so. Well, the Gnostics did the same thing. Valentinius claimed he had Paul. This dispute about this God of the Hebrew Bible was happening with Christians, and many Christians were trying to figure out how to explain how a just God. Some of them said he was just. Some of them said he was evil, Marcion. Some of them said, no, it's the same God, but we deserved all this punishment. And they poured it out on his son, and now we don't have to deal with any of that anymore. I mean, as if things have changed since Jesus came. But the point is, Christianity is not Judaism. Christianity is not the Hebrew Bible. and they're wanting the respect from Christians about their prophets' deeds and actions and whatnot. But you're talking about something that comes after their covenant and their religion is already developed. So no, they're not. They're going to see this thing and go, no. And I'll give you an analogy. If Moses popped up in the 7th century, a guy named Moses, and he was doing the things you see in the Hebrew Bible, let's say, or things you see in Islam, they would demonize him too. The thing is, this is before, and Islam comes after, and here you have an establishment of Christianity, and now they're looking at Islam going, no. This is not.
And the thing is, there's one thing that I want to mention very, very briefly before we move on from here. First off, I missed the part where David said this is evil. Expansionism and this and that is evil. He's merely pointing out that this stuff exists within Islam, which is why we criticize it. Part of the topic. Secondly, there is one big issue. David acknowledges later on that if he was given direct commands from God to do certain things, to commit certain things that may be perceived as atrocities, then he would probably listen to them, because he can acknowledge like everybody else that they are clearly objectively coming from God. Okay, maybe that's a terrible thing to say, maybe that's a terrible thing to think and to perceive. Fair point. The issue is, he is saying, if my religion did have these things, I could agree to them. But the point is, my religion doesn't have these things. It's your religion that has these things. You know, I mean, you could endlessly argue about whether it is reasonable to say I would do certain things if they were part of my religion. But the point is, they are not part of my religion, but they are part of your religion. You know, that's where his stance is, and I think it's very important to put the emotion aside and to see the distinction here, which is the point of the debate.
Right. Well put.
So. Speak directly to all Christians in the audience. You believe that the God of the Old Testament is the same as the God of the New Testament, right? And that same God is Jesus Christ, according to Christianity, right? So when God in the Old Testament in 1 Samuel 15 commands Saul to kill women, children, and even infants, that's really Jesus who commanded that. When God in the Old Testament in Numbers 31, 1 through 24 commands the believers to take virgin girls as sex slaves, that's really Jesus who commanded.
See, fair point. But this is an appeal to emotions and to hypocrisy. It's not part of the point. This is a fallacy. I'm sorry. Nicely argued if you want to argue about theology, but this is a fallacy. It has nothing to do with the topic.
Yeah, because I don't hear Christians obviously never say that. They're never like, yeah, my God's commanding the death of, or the rape of, or whatever it might be, you know, whatever you want to try and paint. No. But I do think it's kind of hypocritical, in my opinion, that Daniel's doing that. Because here he goes. What's his excuse? Well, that was corrupted. So he would have been even more consistent if he'd have said, look, I think that was original, and I agree with the Torah, and I think God commanded that, and that was original, and I'm not going to pussyfoot around and get away from what this actually says, and my religion is just consistently following what the Hebrew Bible's teaching. You guys aren't being consistent, whatever. He's not doing that. He's wanting to take a jab, and then he's wanting to pull back a little. So yeah, that's my opinion.
I don't even understand at this point why he agreed to have this debate and why he was so excited about it and why he proposed the topic. It's kind of strange to me, but yeah.
When God in the Old Testament in Exodus 34, 11 through 17 commands the believers to destroy the Canaanite altars and destroy their idols and symbols, that's really Jesus who commanded that. When God in the Old Testament tells the believers to stone to death fornicating women, all those who violate the Sabbath, all those who blaspheme, all those who curse their parents, those are all in reality commands from Jesus Christ, right? Don't give me the usual Christian apologetics about the New Testament superseding the Old Testament and the New Covenant making the Mosaic Law obsolete. That is missing the point. The point is...
So that is a valid point, but it's missing the point. Interesting. But why exactly are you making this point, Dan?
I think he's just trying to take a jab at Trinity. I honestly think...
But the issue is this is the main point of his argument during this debate, and it misses the entire point of the debate. So what exactly is he doing? It's like...
Well, he's trying to, first of all, he's going at the Trinity in a little subconscious way of hitting the Trinity, but he's also, I think, trying to get David to go, violence is good, man. Like, this is good. Let's be violent people. We need to, in the name of our God.
He
Come
gets
on
to
and
that later on very
really,
explicitly. He
I
says,
must have
yeah,
missed it.
he said toward the ends, he says, we should come together. David, you Christians and we Muslims should come together and fight this evil behemoth of liberalism that is ruining our world and stuff like that. He's basically arguing that Christians and Muslims should come together and fight these disgusting evil atheists and liberals and apostates and all that. It's such a poor attempt. I mean, to gain allies. Someone here pointed it out. Stop Scamming Man said, on Daniel's effort to get an alliance of convenience with Christian plus Muslims in light of modernity, he'll need to go further than if we get a caliphate, we won't have to invade your lands and enslave you.
Wow.
Yeah. So that is it seems basically the point that Daniel Haqiqatjou is going after here. He's trying to say, hey, yes, we are violent, yes, we are intolerant, but you should also be violent and you should also be intolerant. We should together be violent and intolerant. I mean, what the hell is your problem, man? So,
And the sad thing is should we even need to argue if this is right or wrong? That's what's crazy. I feel like it's absurd that people are actually listening to Daniel and going, yeah, because my book says so. Yeah, because my book says so. And this shouldn't even be a dispute in today's society. It shouldn't be. But hey, no wonder we keep having wars and we keep having problems because this kind of stuff continues.
well, people are steered by the things that they are indoctrinated with and believe to be absolutely true. No matter how much you tell them that it's undesirable, they will say, hey, who the hell are you? I have my religion, which comes from Allah, which tells me all these things. Of course it is right. This is why we have over 100,000 people so far watching Daniel Haqiqatjou's debate on his own stream and applauding him for saying fantastic things like he said here, including let's kill the atheists.
According to Christianity, Jesus is the God of the Old Testament, which means Jesus commanded all that killing and stoning and slaughter, all the massacres, all the bloody cleansing of the earth that's described in the Old Testament. Those are all coming from Jesus. And in fact, they're endorsed by Jesus for a 1,300-year period from Moses' time until Jesus' time. So you can't present this modernized picture of Jesus only preaching peace, love, and nonviolence.
That's a narrative that is as old as Christianity. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either. Read the New Testament.
Isn't it? That's you find this narrative about Jesus in the earliest sources of Christianity.
That's
including yeah.
That's why I was going to say, I get into all that. There are theories that people try to propose that Jesus was potentially a rebel leader who was going to lead a revolt. 99% of scholars are like, no, there's not enough evidence for that, right? He is more like a philosopher type. Let me teach you wisdom sayings. Like we talk about, turn the other cheek stuff. If this is from the mouth of Jesus, and as critical scholars will point out, a lot of the texts we see, maybe they put stuff in the mouth of Jesus, whatever. The teachings are nonviolent. They're not teaching. Yeah. And there's clear indications. Peter, put away your sword, live by the sword, die by the sword. I don't want you to live by the sword and die by the sword. Get rid of your sword. We're not killing people. That's not how the kingdom of God is coming. That kind of thing. So, and
the earliest texts of Christianity are older than the Gospels. They are, right? They are the epistles are the certain epistles are the earliest texts that we have, or the oldest remaining texts, and those texts are the initial texts that advocate for peace and love and forgiveness and this and that and non-fighting, and those texts come together with the Gospels. The New Testament that we have comes together and tells us initially, gives us initially this whole message of nonviolence and of peace and forgiveness and turning the other cheek and all that. This is not something that has developed in modernity. This is something that the earliest Christian authors and the earliest Christian texts said, which was then turned into a state religion and made violent by the Roman Empire and by authorities, and then again today became modernized and returned to peace and love and forgiveness. I mean, you could now argue about whether that is consistent and whether that is good or bad or whatever it is, but hey, that is the history of it.
Take up your cross and follow me. And what happens, even in church tradition, even though there's a lot of mythologizing of martyrdom, is the idea that they were martyrs, not that they went and killed, but they were killed by people, not that they killed people. That's my point.
Yeah. Zagros Özkan said, don't become any god's puppet like David or Daniel, or you will end up having to say stupid stuff like, yes, I would sacrifice my kids if God asked me. Thank you for the super chat, Zagras, as always.
Jesus, according to Christianity, is quite a vengeful and wrathful God, or at least he was in Old Testament times. How can a Christian who has to believe all this about Jesus Christ turn around and criticize Islam for violence, especially since, according to the Bible, Jesus even calls for killing women, children, and infants? There's nothing like that in the Quran and Hadith. So isn't this the most outrageous double standard? David.
Didn't we just read a Hadith on that, where Muhammad clearly says it's okay that you killed the women and children during the night raid?
Would please explain this. Explain how you can criticize Islam and smear the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a violent, bloodthirsty warmonger, when according to your own theology, your God, Jesus Christ, also commanded and approved of all these things and more. So David Wood, you're extremely dishonest when you criticize Islam, and in fact,
why is he so angry?
He's excited. He
stresses
is
me out.
excited.
Man. It stresses me out that he's yelling at us here.
I'm like listening, but no, his whole logic there, he's trying to set up. I get what he's trying to do, but yeah, even Christians in the 7th century saw problems with this. With Muhammad, and there was a Jew, a forced convert Jew. I read this in Sean Anthony's book on the historical Muhammad, and there was this the doctrine of Jacob, or Jacobani, something like that. But the point is, in this, his friend comes and says, "There's this like bloodthirsty prophet who says he has the keys to paradise." And like he's out here like on a, if you will, on a rise to expand this empire, and he's out here ready to kill people in the name of God. The Christians saw that and were like, yeah. And you had Heraclius, the emperor, and stuff they were fighting the Persians and stuff at the same time. But this guy outshined them in terms of warfare. Like he was really ruthless, and I think that caught their attention.
Yep. Stop defending Christianity.
I really hate you for what you're doing, because you're essentially training your fellow Christians to reject the Bible and hate Moses and Jesus. Because when you tell your Christian audience that Islam is a false religion because it has violence and intolerance, what's going to happen when those same Christians open up the Bible and read all the violence and intolerance within its pages?
I love how David has this, I heard all of this before face.
The sad thing is Daniel's right, but Christianity is saying we divorce ourselves from the Hebrew Bible like that. So anyway.
And the thing is, I mean, this is very old in Christian scholarship. So
conclude that Christianity is a false religion too. So when you try to score cheap points against Islam on violence, you're basically undermining the Bible and Moses and Jesus at the same time. You are in fact
Jesus.
What?
He added Jesus in there because he's already made Jesus God, and you see how he did that. So
undermining the Bible and Moses and Jesus at the same time.
Oh yeah.
You are in fact helping atheists drive Christians into apostasy and to lose faith. You're paving the road for this. How do you justify that, David?
Excuse me, but I'm very much sure that if David advocated for a Christianity which preaches all the things that Daniel Haqiqatjou preaches, he would be driving people so much faster towards leaving Christianity and becoming atheists. So I have no idea what this guy is on about. He really thinks he's making a point there.
Yeah, I know a lot of ex-Muslims that were driven to be atheists because of Islam. It's not like literally people like Daniel are the number one proponents with what they're saying for why people are realizing, no, thank you. I don't want to be part of that.
Too many ex-Muslims leave Islam because of Islam's violent, intolerant aspects, which they cannot reconcile with their understanding of humanity and empathy and compassion and whatever you have.
The second inconsistency from Christian missionaries and apologists is what I call the Christian governance question. I have a question for all the Christians watching this. Do you believe that God sent down guidance for every facet of life? Did God give human beings moral principles by which to conduct themselves in every domain of our earthly existence? As Muslims, we fully believe that. We know that God sent down guidance through revelation since the beginning of human creation, culminating in final revelation to Muhammad.
Okay, now he is going into a theology, which has, again, nothing to do with the topic, and basically saying in Christianity, you don't have a system which tells you how to live your life and how to go to the toilet. But in Islam, we do have that. So therefore, what? I don't know. Let's see.
Well, this is a good point, because in the debate, Daniel literally is setting all that up. He's saying, we tell you when to sneeze, when to cough, how to go to the bathroom, everything. So when David just simply is responding about how silly and ridiculous that is, and Daniel kind of looks at him like, why are you talking about urine and this and that? you're the one who brought it up. You're the one who wants to talk about every facet of life. So technically, Daniel is arguing with David about that for no reason. It's kind of like, dude, you brought it up. So David's just pointing out, like, yeah, how many times do I wipe? Do I wipe with my right hand or my left hand? And like, like this is what you're now saying, Daniel. And then David is just addressing it. And then you're looking at him going, why are you talking about pee and this and that? It's like, you kind of are bringing this up.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Half the debate turned into a discussion about pee. It's very
And the final revelation contains guidance for every domain of life, not just guidance for how to conduct ourselves as individuals, but also guidance in the domains of family relations, social relations, community organization, economics, and yes, even law and governance. And it makes sense, right? If God in his ultimate wisdom created us to dwell on this earth, he would also not want us to be stumbling around in the dark. He would want to provide us with the light of guidance on how to live life on the micro scale, but also guidance on how to organize our societies on the macro scale in terms of law, politics, and governance. In Islam, that guidance that encompasses both the micro and the macro is the Sharia, or Islamic law. But my question is, where is that guidance found in Christianity? Sure, Christianity sets down principles on personal piety, self-sacrifice, modesty, and other values on the individual scale. But what about the macro scale? What about law and governance? Where does Christianity, Jesus Christ, teach human beings how to regulate criminality, how to set up a just judiciary system, how to deal with hostile invading forces, how to stamp out social vice? Where in Christianity are there specific guidelines for these things?
I'm sorry, this is going to be an ad hominem, but I don't think that Daniel Haqiqatjou is living a very healthy life. So I'm not sure why he's leading with this whole thing on how Islam teaches you how to live your life in a brilliant, fantastic way. But that aside, this is very strange. He's basically trying to impose his understanding of what a religion should be and his expectation of what a revelation and what a God should be onto everyone else's religion and everyone else's understanding of what religion and what God is supposed to be. He's basically saying, if you have a religion, then this religion is supposed to tell you everything in your life. And if there is a God, then this God should be micromanaging you. So why is Christianity not micromanaging you? Islam is micromanaging us. Well, that is an expectation that you have because you are a Muslim. That's not an expectation that is fundamental to religion, to theology, to theism in general. This is something that you have because you are a Muslim. Why do you presuppose that a God should necessarily be involved in every single thing that you do in your life? Why does that have to be true? I could accept that there may be a God out there who is largely uninvolved and who just wants to, watch his creation do things without giving them instructions on every single thing that they do in their lives, including how to lay down, how to position yourself in bed, which is literally something that exists in Islam, how to position yourself when you drink water, how to pee, and this and that. This is an expectation that you have as a Muslim, and this is a theological argument that has, again, very little to do with the topic at hand.
It's like what happened when Muhammad Hijab recently interviewed Bart Ehrman, and he was talking about he was talking about contradictions in the New Testament because Bart Ehrman's the guy, right? But then he wanted to make this argument, well, we don't have any contradictions. And Bart didn't even argue with him because it's not his expertise. But also he goes, well, the phone book doesn't have any contradictions. And the point is, what's your point? I mean, if I tell you how many times to wash your hands, the Jews had this very strict oral law teachings of how you wash your hands, how you ceremonially touch this and that, and the silverware, and where to use the restroom. I mean, literally, if you go back to the Qumran sect, they didn't use, some of them, probably the Essenes, didn't use the restroom on Sabbath. They hold their bowels in on Sabbath. They didn't go to the bathroom at all. And in fact, they didn't have a bathroom in the house. It was an outhouse. So they didn't leave the house. There's different rules and regulations. Does that prove that it's God? I mean, like, it's kind of ridiculous to me, but
yeah. Bart Ehrman brought up the similar things. Mohammed Hijab and his crew kind of deceptively invited Bart Ehrman I guess with Bart Ehrman's expectation that he would be talking about his work regarding Jesus and this and that, then Mohammed Hijab tries to preach to him what Islam is and what God is supposed to be and how a revelation is supposed to be. Of course, Bart Ehrman was completely annoyed and bored by that, and basically said to him, "You just have your own expectations of what God is supposed to do and how God is supposed to communicate, and who are you to say that? You do that because you are a Muslim." And the same thing is happening here. Daniel Haqiqatjou is imposing his understanding of what God is supposed to be and how God is supposed to communicate onto the rest of the world, because he thinks Islam is this way and everyone is supposed to believe this way, and that's just absurd. It lacks an understanding of cultural differences, of religious differences, and it's weak, and needless to say, completely besides the point. Kyrie Elysian, Jesus' Lord, said, "Eastern Orthodoxy is not Protestantism. We have a complete regard for Judaism. It is in every liturgy. You are in error. The theology is different." Okay, yeah, fair point. I've heard that before. We could go into that, but yeah, enlighten me, please.
Things are important, right? Human well-being critically depends on a society with just laws and governance, right? So where does Christianity tell us what just law and governance actually entail? This is the Christian governance question, and this is really a question about ideals. What does Christianity say about the ideal Christian society? What does Christianity teach regarding setting up the ideal Christian nation? In Islam, there is no mystery here. Islam is very clear, robust, and detailed in its teachings about what kinds of law and governance the ideal Muslim nation has. In fact, Christians are very familiar with many aspects of the ideal Islamic nation because they're constantly criticizing it. They claim that the ideal Islamic nation has corporal punishment, capital punishment, warfare, and so forth. As a Muslim, I gladly concede all of that. I have to concede all of that because the society of the Prophet Muhammad and the four rightly guided caliphs was the ideal Islamic nation and included all of those things. But David and Christian missionaries—
He just told you, by the way. He just told you exactly what you said. He's assuming that this is already true.
Yeah.
And because it says this is why I know what it says is true. It's circular reasoning. But anyway. It
is dumb. And here's the thing. Daniel Haqiqatjou very often during his debates tries to bring up certain scholars and certain texts that he cherry picks, which he twists in order to support his own wicked views. I even have one of those books around here somewhere that I just bought because he brought it up. And I thought, let me see what this book actually says. It's called War Before Civilization. And he kind of argues that this book is completely in alignment with his understanding of how humans do things like sex slavery or child marriage because they see benefit in them. The book actually criticizes that and points out the savagery of the past. So, but the funny thing is, he kind of presents the issue as if Islam has an ideal system for everybody, for all humanity. I will tell you, I started studying psychology. I took several courses on psychology. And one thing that psychologists will tell you, that anthropologists will tell you, is that there is no system in the world which will be perfectly suitable to all humans equally who are alive in the world, or for all humans over 2,000 years. This is absurd. It's impossible. People don't function like this. People are bound to change. People change all the time. People have major differences within the same culture and between cultures all the time, and they are bound to change. If you imposed Islam upon everybody on the planet, the population of global Muslims would necessarily begin making changes within this Islamic global empire and would start leading the Islamic belief and Islamic governance into different directions, and heresies would emerge. This is a natural part of what we are as humans. It is stupid to claim that there is this perfect system that takes control of all of our problems, and that is Islam. Humans don't function this way.
Yeah, it makes me think like free will. Like, where does that play? Here, I'm giving you free will, but I want you to have every single robotic thing you must do at the same time.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
And if not, then we will kill you.
Islamic nation without defining the ideal Christian nation. That's not fair. You want to criticize Islam and the Prophet Muhammad for Islamic law and warfare and governance, Fine, but what's your brilliant alternative? Look, it's easy for Christians to criticize Muhammad ﷺ for violence and intolerance because the reality is setting up laws and establishing governance is never a peaceful process. No matter how good and pure a person you are, there's always evil people that are going to oppose and fight you. So what are you going to do? Are you going to give up establishing just laws on earth and allow evil satanic forces to rule? Or are you going to fight back, which means resorting to violence? Because those are the only two options. What's so bizarre from Christians is that they criticize the Prophet Muhammad for this. They criticize him for violence, but that violence is inevitable for anyone who wants to establish a just society in the vision of God Almighty.
I'm sorry to say this, but based on what he just said, these last seconds, based on what he just said, this whole point that he just made, I have to say this was an incredibly idiotic thing to argue on Daniel Haqiqatjou's behalf. It was incredibly stupid, incredibly fallacious. He gave a false dichotomy, a false choice. Ironically, he later calls out a false choice when there is none. He presents a world in which you either control society entirely and impose authoritarian rules and hold them in a tight grip, or else everything will fall apart and go to hell and everything will be destroyed, and and you will be left with anarchy and chaos and destruction and extinction and this and that. There are only these two extremes to him. I mean, am I wrong to make this conclusion from what he just said?
No.
From what he says all the time.
It's fundamentalism. I hear it within Christian circles as well, because I come out of this and I deal with this every day. But yes, this is an extreme form of fundamentalism, and there is no gray area for them. It's black or white. And notice he keeps talking about demonic, evil people. Like the other people there's only good and bad, and this is the way the world is. So you need to establish just laws. You need to establish this and that. And what kind of makes me intrigued and why I'm like wanting to get into early Islam is that why didn't they just pick up with the Jews? Why didn't Muhammad just become a practicing rabbi? Or, why didn't he pick up Christianity and just become a Christian? Why is this different and new? And what is it trying to do? These are big questions I want to answer on my channel, having experts come on. And no one knows the absolute answer to all these questions, but it is interesting that this new guy on the block comes on and hear the rise of an empire and the conquering of people, yet they're piggybacking off of stuff and saying, yet this is our final prophet, which both Judaism and Christianity do not accept. It's interesting.
Interesting super chat from Adam Yuri said, if the Trinity is true, then Jesus is responsible for the slaughter of the Canaanites. No. Again, a discussion that we had earlier, theological discussion, you could argue yes. And you could have a long discussion on this based on different perspectives, no matter where you stand in terms of belief or disbelief. But again, it would be entirely besides the point here,
Yeah, and I'd say yes, theologically, absolutely. But at the end of the day,
I would agree. But again,
if you're taking Orthodox Trinitarian understanding, I think that there's some responsibility probably there. But you're right. This gets off into a rabbit trail, but that's why I said Marcion didn't think that. He thought that God was different.
Yeah. But so to point this whole thing out here, this is black and white thinking from Daniel Haqiqatjou, which he engages in all the time whenever he has a debate, and he preaches this by himself too. And this is not unique to him, but he presents this all the time and in very extreme terms. A black and white thinking of you will either have Islamic justice or you will have complete chaos and human extinction. You will either have no justice or you will have brutal authoritarianism. You will either have Islam or you will have evil Satan or whatever it is. Humans do not function this way. And expecting David to present an alternative to all human faculties and all parts of your life is a dumb expectation. David doesn't believe in that. Most people don't believe in that. David believes in a moral guide in his religion, but believes in different philosophies in terms of how to rule a nation, for example, as do most people in the world. It is your fundamentalist Islamic expectation to demand that from people.
I think this is where you're right. You're touching the foundation. Daniel's wanting David to be black and white, full through and through. And there are fundamentalist Christians or Abrahamic believers, period, anyone in the vein of it. There are some that are black and white in all these three religions. But Daniel's trying to get David to be like, go ahead, everyone's evil that isn't part of your religion. Be like us, you know? And sure, there are some Christians who think that way. And then there's more progressive ones who aren't like that. But
yeah. All right.
Bible attests to this. Just look at the life of, for example, Moses. When Christians compare Muhammad and Jesus, peace be upon them, they say Muhammad was about war, corporal punishment, imposing law, while Jesus was about peace and turning the other cheek. Well, that's not really a fair comparison because Jesus was not involved in government or law. He was not a general. He did not call for armed struggle. So of course he's going to be relatively more peaceful. A fair comparison would be to ask, if Jesus were to have created the ideal Christian nation and established God's law and justice on earth, how would he have done it?
Interesting and fair point. A point that people have brought before, a point that I have thought about before. But again, I'm sorry to say this over and over again. What in the world does it have to do with the point? Because the point is, okay, Jesus could have done this and this and this and that. Jesus could have become like Santa Claus or whatever. You could say whatever the hell you want. But the point is, Christianity is a religion. Islam is a religion. Islam has a fundamental central character. Christianity has a central character. The central character of Christianity is a guy like Jesus, who did all the things that Jesus did and said all the things that Jesus said. Whereas Islam has Muhammad, who did all the terrible things that Muhammad did and said all the terrible things that Muhammad said. That is the point. You could endlessly philosophize and think about possible scenarios of what Muhammad would have done instead or what Jesus would have done instead. But how is that part of the discussion?
Just to paint two pictures here, the way Daniel's expecting God to change the world is through the men and women of Islam, mainly the men, of course, through warfare. So his picture of bringing God's kingdom, if you could use the term, on earth is through, you got to do it violently. And the way Christians understood it is that Jesus would return. Now, how that gets interpreted as theological and stuff, looking in the book of Revelation, there's 144,000 virgin men, 12,000 from each tribe that are going to fight the wicked. Many scholars think this book is talking about the Roman Empire. Other scholars have different, there's so many things. But at the end of the day, they weren't thinking, pick up a sword. We humans will do it. It's kind of like that Old Testament passage that says, be still and know that I'm your God. When they go to battle another nation, they were told to just stand there. Don't do anything and just watch the wonder of God, where, comets and asteroids or whatever come down and stones of fire fall from heaven and are hitting and destroying the enemy, and God destroys them right in front of the people of Israel. The point is, there's no violence being taken in the Christian paradigm in order to create the kingdom of God on earth, and there is here. And I'm talking textual wise. What happened later on in history is a different story.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. We will not go through the whole debate, everybody. The whole debate is 3 hours and 45 minutes long. We will
do a series of it.
I think we should stop after Daniel Haqiqatjou's opening statement.
Okay.
Maybe leave our final comments on this whole thing, and let us know, everybody, if this is interesting, if this is good, if you want us to come back and go on with this whole debate and analyze it, we would be happy to do that again. I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, I think a lot of people look in the chat. Brandon says, I can't stand Myth Vision, right? Brandon, then other people say, I love Myth Vision. A lot of your audience are Christians.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not just Christians. I'm just saying a lot of your audience are, which they're not going to like what I have to say when it comes to being critical, of course, of Christianity and then the Hebrew Bible. But I'm just trying to be as fair and consistent as I can in terms of both. I think that's the right thing to do.
And that's the point. I mean, that's why I have you here, is because I know that many people on here will not like what you say, and we will have different perspectives. So I want to have you here so I could make myself look better and become more popular.
Exactly. Now I figured it out. This is a good.
It's a good move, right? And now after this one, I will of course kick you out and do the next episode by myself with somebody else. All right, let's move on.
And how could he have done it without resorting to violence, bloodshed, and intolerance? The inconvenient truth for Christians is Jesus didn't create a Christian nation. Jesus can be understood as following in the line of many Hebrew prophets who did not aim to introduce a new law. Perhaps he was only refining elements of the old law. He didn't aim to provide any specific guidance on how to establish the laws of governance of the ideal Christian nation. So if you can't look to Jesus for guidance on how to establish this nation, who can you look to? Muslims have the example of Muhammad as the model. What do Christians have? The third inconsistency is that what I call the
They don't, because they don't need to have something like that, because that's an Islamic concept.
Yeah, their model is not a warrior model. It's not a violent model. So
I mean, that's so dumb. I'm sorry.
politics of Jesus question. David Wood wants to make you believe that faith in Jesus' message should cause you to be critical of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, and the Sharia. But is this true? Would Jesus, as he is described in the Bible, disapprove of Muhammad? Well, it really depends on Jesus' political outlook. There are at least three possible options. The first possibility is that Jesus was not concerned with politics, law, and war. Rather, he's concerned only with individual salvation. In other words, Jesus is not a political Messiah. Rather, he's a personal Messiah for individual salvation. On this view, Jesus is not concerned with criticizing or rebelling against the Roman pagan regime, and he would presumably not be interested in criticizing or rebelling against other regimes like an Islamic government or a communist government or a liberal government. He is not concerned with politics at all. On this view of Jesus' teaching do not imply a critique of Caesar's law and military politics, but this would also mean that Jesus wouldn't be critical of Prophet Muhammad. Sorry.
I completely missed the point here, but
he's trying. So this gets into theories about Jesus, right?
But the thing is, isn't it a complete waste of time to talk about this? It's like, again, in alignment with his expectations of what a religion should be or how a religion should work, and whether David should be entirely following his, the example of Jesus or not, and all that. Let me know what you think.
Guessing that Jesus was a political figure is difficult to pin down.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would assume he's most likely, and it doesn't mean that there wasn't potentially. I mean, this gets into where I'm not Christian at this point. What was this guy saying? Did he really think of himself as a potential Messiah figure that was going to be king of the Jews, as Bart Ehrman would say, and that he was killed for that very thing of assuming he might end up being the king of the Jews? There's no king but Caesar, so they end up executing him. At the end of the day, though, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make Jesus a political figure. It sounds like he wants to make Jesus sound like Muhammad. We know Muhammad was definitely a political figure.
Yeah,
we got to make Jesus something. Was Jesus just some Socratic philosopher who was just preaching these interesting sayings of golden rule and such, or was he actively political in some sense? And I think he's throwing out a few different ideas right now, so we don't really know. We don't really know what he's saying yet.
And the thing is, Jesus would agree with us. Jesus wouldn't oppose us.
Right.
Jesus wouldn't do what you do, David.
His laws and military policies. I mean, why would Jesus be fine with the pagan Roman emperor who was engaged in persecuting believers, but have a problem with Muhammad? So this option is out. The second possibility is that Jesus is concerned with
pause.
But he's an anarchist.
He said this problem's out. Is it really out? Because when you compare, this is an interesting thing, because Jesus would, according to what we have him saying, that people are saying he's saying, he would have had you turn your cheek. He wouldn't have you fight the enemy. So knowing whether he hated or looked at the Roman emperor as wicked and a bad person, there's no like, oh, this is his thoughts about Nero coming up in 30 years, 20 years. No, we don't know. We know that he knew what wickedness was according to him and good and righteousness and all that. But no, he doesn't come out. He clearly takes the other position, if anything, the opposite position of what Daniel is trying to make Jesus probably say. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean,
and he's very harsh and critical of the hypocrites in his surrounding and of things like that, the world. And he does not, despite saying that these people are wicked, does not actively oppose them and rebel against them. And that's not exactly a point for him. And it's.
In the book of Acts, I'll make one point. There's this place where it talks about these rebels, these guys, Judas the Galilean, Theudas, the Egyptian, these other figures that Josephus talks about that were potentially rebellious to the emperor, to Roman, to the Roman armies and whatnot. And they ended up making them go extinct. They killed off their leaders. They destroyed these movements. And of course, this is where Gamaliel, the Jewish Sanhedrin, is standing there saying, look, men, talking to the Jews, don't fight the Christians, because look, these guys, they got destroyed on their own. They're going to destroy themselves if this isn't from God, right? Of course, this is the story of Acts. But the point is, he's saying, the book of Acts is saying, our Jesus movement isn't these movements. I think that's what the implication is in Acts. So it's not a rebellious political movement.
By the way, where is this super chat here on the screen? Let me see. Yeah, Kyrie Elyson, Jesus is Lord, said, the only thing you do wrong is stick with the very rudimentary late understanding of Christianity, aka Protestant only, shallow methodology.
Yeah.
I understand your criticism. I just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I
But you know
don't.
what? I actually would be very interested in seeing a debate between Jay Dyer, who's an Orthodox Christian, and Daniel Haqiqatjou. That would be such a such a mess. I think I would love to see that happen.
I would like to know what he's talking about in particular. Give me examples instead of talking about people's methodology being wrong or what we're saying is only Protestant onlyism, as though that we're coming only at this from a Protestant angle. Sure, we know David Wood is Protestant. We understand that. I was a Protestant. The point is, what example are you saying? That I need examples. So
I am a Protestant. Just kidding.
Someone's gonna say you are, by the way.
Who believes in abolishing law and armies because these things are violent and intolerant. This is why Jesus says things like, he who is without sin should cast the first stone, or do not resist an evil person and turn the other cheek. If someone assaults you, or if an unjust person takes your coat, give him your cloak as well. The interpretation is that Jesus is not talking about an ethic of forgiveness in these Bible verses. He's actually talking about abolishing laws against assault and robbery. He's against policing people. He's against a military force that would stop a foreign army from assaulting and robbing the populace. On this view, Jesus would see Muhammad as very evil for the specific reason that Muhammad is not an anarchist. Rather, Muhammad is someone who passed laws and had a military policy which entailed violence. But of course, such a view of Jesus is absurd, and no pre-modern Christian ever believed he was an anarchist. So this option is out. The third possibility is that Jesus is concerned with politics.
I don't even know how to. I don't even know how to argue with that. So this is your interpretation, but according to this interpretation. But this interpretation doesn't work, so that is out. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's saying since Christians never saw Jesus this way, therefore he's trying to make the point.
Yeah, but I feel like he's still stuck on the whole idea that that Christianity has to somehow tell them exactly how to respond to Islam or how to work with Islam. So
well, he did the exact fundamentalist thing. Jesus was
yeah.
all political, anti-Roman warrior. Pick up your swords, let's go fight. Muhammad, or he's a pacifist running around absolutely saying don't have anything to do with anything, and just forget about everything. And there's that view, right? Just like
anarchy. Rather, he wishes to establish a modern liberal state. According to this vision of Jesus, Jesus wanted a state that upheld something like modern human rights norms and had a foreign policy that consisted of strictly defensive wars. On this view, Jesus would condemn Islam because Islam is not compatible with such a modern liberal state. The problem with this option is that a modern liberal state of this type did not exist before the Enlightenment in the 18th and 19th centuries. Furthermore, modern liberal secularism.
This is again a complete expectation of what you think Jesus should have done, of your misinterpretation of the role of Jesus within the religion of Christianity.
And
where you think what?
I was going to say, I suspect he's going to interpret Jesus through his Islamic lens. So now, Jesus gets painted with my interpretation of 7th century onward Islamic understanding. And then that he's looking back. Jesus has, remember, he started circular reasoning. It's true. Now let's find out how and why it's true, because it's true. Circular reasoning. So he's going to say Islam's true. And Islam says that Jesus was one of the prophets, peace be upon him. Of course, add that little caveat. And then they're going to say, let's prove that Jesus is the prophet by making him fit our Islamic understanding.
Yeah, there are your Christian interpretations of Jesus, but of course they are all wrong. Here's my Islamic interpretation of Jesus, and that is clearly right because it is Islamic. Well, how can you argue against that?
Was primarily created by atheists, deists, and critics of Christianity. Furthermore, earlier states established by Christians, like the Byzantine Empire, the Spanish Empire, etc., none of these were modern liberal states or anything close in terms of respecting human rights and so forth. How could Jesus have called for a state that never existed? This is a historical error.
Jesus never called for such a state. He's not getting it. I'm sorry, he's not getting it. Jesus never called for such a state. Because it's not part of what Christians expect from their religion, what they expected from their religion. I'm sorry. They might have interpreted how a state should work according to Christianity or by Christian morals, such as Saint Augustine, for example, is known for having written a whole book about that.
City of God.
Yeah. But this is not a fundamental expectation within Christianity. This is an expectation that you have as a Muslim from religion.
And look, we grant that's later. Even Christians are now taking government and trying to apply it to the New Testament. That's a later anachronistic thing. They're trying to use their principal text to kind of fit this, of course, with church tradition as well, because it's not just the text, but you have both happening at the same time. And Jesus says his kingdom is not of this world. Now, if those are words that came from the lips of the actual historical man Jesus, that doesn't sound very earthly and very political to me.
So this option is out. Furthermore, Christians should consider what is involved in a modern liberal state. It involves, among other things, protecting the free speech of people who blaspheme God, facilitating sex outside of marriage, which destroys traditional family and gender roles. Where's that? Where is it that Jesus claims that the state should protect so-called human rights of this type?
It's nowhere, because such a thing is not expected from Jesus. How long is he going to go down this idiotic route? It's so dumb.
There is no proof of this. By extension, there is no proof that Jesus would have condemned the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ or Islam for not sufficiently protecting people's rights to blaspheme and have fornication and who attack family life. David Wood is abusing the historical Jesus by claiming that he was an advocate for these types of liberal ideals and that he would have disapproved of Islam.
Hold on, pause.
Not at all.
David Wood did not. He just that. So,
Never
and
happened.
I totally disagree. I want everyone to know. I don't even agree with David Wood, right? At the end of the day. But like, I'm sure we could have a civil conversation and have a fun time doing so. David Wood never said that. He never said Jesus is pro this. He's trying to make the point that David lives in a society that allows for such things. And you're standing back allowing these things to happen. See, that's the difference between his Christian worldview and Daniel's. Daniel thinks, I got to go change this. I have to change how you guys are behaving. David is saying, I'll pray for you. I'm going to try and show love and kindness. And maybe that in some way, shape, or form can help. I guess I'm making a guess here because I can't read his mind. I'm just thinking that's the Christian worldview David's trying to propose. Not, all right, guys, let's all go have an orgy at the LGBTQ community. That's not what David is trying to say either. But David thinks if you stand back and let it happen, you're you're kind of like you're promoting it by standing back and allowing these things to take place. You're actually saying thumbs up. That's
again, he's completely trying to impose this idea that Christianity is supposed to, or that David Wood is supposed to have a view on what must be done to people who do certain things. He thinks that David Wood must present a religious idea where Jesus tells him exactly who to criticize, who not to criticize, who to oppose, not to oppose, how to judge people to do certain things, what not to judge, and so on. But that is not what David Wood ever proposed, nor what David Wood believes in, nor what Christianity is about. This is your Islamic expectation of what a religion is supposed to be. And David Wood never made the argument, and never has, as far as I understand, made an argument and said, Jesus wants me to do this and this and this. He said so, therefore I will do this and this and this about political ideas like Islam. That's not what Christianity is about. That's not what Christianity in history is about. That's not what Christianity fundamentally is about. That's not what David Wood's Christianity is about. So he's talking about something that is not part of the discussion at all.
Right.
This is the politics of Jesus question, and there's also the Old Testament question and the Christian governance question. If David cannot answer these three issues in the debate, he really has no leg to stand on in criticizing Islam for violence and intolerance.
Okay, that's it.
We're gonna have to pick it up, aren't we?
Yeah, this is it. It's so fun. So much fun.
It's fun, man. It's fun.
Can you recount what the three questions were?
In particular with what Daniel brought up?
Yeah, the three questions that David Wood is supposed to respond to.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
It's too mixed up, but I think I made a few notes on that stuff. I could go back and look at that stuff, but basically, how could David be a hypocrite? The second question was Islam provides a complete way of living and ruling. What does Christianity do instead? That's a very dumb question to ask, but that was his question. The third question was, is this really what Jesus wanted you to do, to oppose Islam and all that? So that is the third question. The first question is, I believe, about the Old Testament. It's like, how can you complain about Islam when the Old Testament does this and this and that? In my opinion, and I seriously think this, I don't know, maybe you can tell me that I'm biased about this, but in my opinion, all three of these questions are entirely irrelevant to the point at hand, and are in fact a misunderstanding based on your own Islamic biases, especially the last two questions, which are what is your alternative to the Islamic State, and would Jesus want you to criticize Islam? These questions are entirely irrelevant and completely a misunderstanding of what religion is supposed to be and what Christianity is.
Yeah, the second one, it just sounds like Daniel's trying to say, I have a rule book or a religion that teaches every facet of life, including political. You are saying Christianity and Jesus doesn't teach that. And he admits somewhere in this debate that he thinks that that's not why Jesus came, was to set up a political, like he even admits this sometime. But he's like, you say you follow Jesus. Well, what is your rule of government? What is your setup? And of course, Christians will refer to Paul and Romans 13 and other places where he's like, look, the government is set up by God, and that is something that we should follow and obey. And at the time, it was the Romans. These are pagans. So the idea that it's anti-pagan, no, they expected God to change things. And of course, eventually, Christians saw this as prophecy throughout history. What ends up happening? The very pagans themselves became the very thing that technically they were persecuting. Now, I'm not even a Christian, but I'm willing to go to bat and say Constantine and these other emperors became Christian. They became the very thing they were fighting against. And it didn't take a sword to do that. So
I made notes of the three questions. The first question is Islam bad, but Old Testament also bad? The second question is Islam good? What is your alternative? And the third question is, what would Jesus do?
exactly.
These are the questions that yes, and these are very, very strange questions to pose in response to an opening statement of David Wood, where he basically says Christianity is peaceful and non-violent. Islam is violent and hateful. And in response, Daniel Haqiqatjou says, Old Testament bad. What is your alternative? What would Jesus do?
Yeah, or he's trying to say Old Testament. Yeah, your Old Testament, and it's Daniel's as well, technically, in a sense, is showing these bad things, and you're trying to judge me, but you're not judging it. And I know a lot of Christians that say, yeah, the Old Testament is bad news. I know a lot of Christians who believe it still, and they go, yeah, we don't live under that no more. I'm glad we moved on. I get it. I know what Daniel's trying to do, but at the end of the day, it's like we are agreeing, like you and I agree to come together and have a discussion on whether your religion is violent. Okay, let's just take the topic here. I'm a Christian. You're a Muslim. Sorry for putting you into that position, but we agree to have a debate about whether your religion or my religion are violent or tolerant. We come together. I prepare and say, hey, my religion is not violent and hateful, but your religion is violent and hateful. And you then have prepared apparently a brilliant opening statement and say to me, yeah, my religion might be bad, might be violent, but what about your religion? What about the past of your religion? Right.
Well, I mean,
that's actually what he's doing. So the one connection he has ultimately, and Muslims love to argue about the Trinity to show you the illogical, it doesn't make sense and things like that. He's trying to bridge that Trinity concept to the God of the Old Testament and then say he gave a thumbs up to all that stuff. And that's his connection. He's trying to point out. That's really it.
Yeah.
That's the whole argument, other than the fact that how do we live? How do we wipe our butts? How do we, all of that stuff. So
how can we pee without Islam? How can I know how to position myself on the toilet if I don't have Islam telling me how to do it?
In Orthodox,
I need Islam. Okay, here's an example. In Orthodox theology is intertwined with morals and ethics. Orthodox talks about phronema, conduct with people based on Jesus, how God became man so that we may become like God. Okay. Isn't it intertwined with morals and ethics? Okay.
Thank you for the super chat.
Do you have I guess the point is he's trying to make is that Orthodox Christianity is different from Protestant Christianity in that Orthodox Christianity is more directly involved, more directly intervenes with your in your life as opposed to Protestant Christianity. I mean, I get it, But is it really comparable to Islam, which has the whole thing going on? You know, how to pee and how to wipe yourself after going to the toilet, how you should lay in your bed, and all that. It's I think there is a huge difference here, and that is the whole thing that Daniel is presenting. This is what Islam is. It gives us a complete guide from how to wake up to how to go to bed. And you should have an alternative to that. Christianity does not have an alternative to that. Therefore, Christianity is not good. That's what he's arguing. And I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. I mean,
Yeah. But thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Zagros Özkan finally said Mark 7:9-13 and Nisa 34 are, I think, equally effed up. Mark 7:9-13 coming directly from Jesus, where he's making reference to Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. What does Mark 7:9-13 say? Mark 7:9-13.
9-13. He also said to them, you neatly reject the commandment of God in order to set up your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever insults his father or mother must be put to death. But you say that if anyone tells his father or mother, whatever help you would have received from me is Corban, that is a gift from God. Then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother. And he said 9-13, and the last verse is, thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like this. I mean, there's a lot of scholars who point out Jesus seems to have taken a much more relaxed view of the Torah, and there's these traditions that were set up and continued to be practiced by a lot of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and such, were very strict and overboard and not really relaxed. There's different views out there on scholarship when it comes to this, but I'm not sure exactly what he's
I don't get the Quran chapter 4 verse 34. What he's citing here is the verse that says men have been made protectors over their wives. They're superior. They're if the wives disobey, then you're supposed to warn them, separate them in beds, and then beat them. That's what the Quran says in chapter 4 verse 34. And Zagros is saying that Mark 7:9-13 is just as messed up as that, which I do not see here. I would have to probably sit down and read further on, about this, but I don't think that's what the reference here is about. He is criticizing the Pharisees in this chapter, right? This is one of those things again where he points out, you Pharisees, you are claim to be teachers of the law, but you have abandoned the law. You do this and this and that. That's what he does. He doesn't give a prescription on how to act as a Christian, which he does according to the Gospels all the time. Very often, he criticizes them for being hypocrites because they are critical of others and of him, and he turns around on them and onto them and says, your laws say this and this and this, but you instead do this and this and this. So who are you to judge people? You have strayed from the laws that you pretend to protect.
Right.
And then he separately then gives his message to the people who follow him. So yeah. All right. But thank you for that, Zagros. I appreciate it. I promise to look into that later on. Adam Irristate, wouldn't Haqiqatjou both worship a fascist god? They are more alike than different. Only Daniel seems to be aware of that and leans into it. I disagree. I think they are very much fundamentally different. I mean, you could believe that they are, in essence, a god that demands your belief, or else he will punish you. And I will agree. I will say that is absurd. And the Abrahamic understanding of God in general is, to me, unacceptable in that regard. I think that is simply that is an unnecessarily authoritarian God that you would not expect from an all-knowing, all-forgiving, good God. It doesn't unite very well with the human experience. Would I describe them as very much alike? I wouldn't say so. I don't think so.
I don't know David Wood, so I can't say anything about him, but or Daniel. At the end of the day, though, the God that is being described there, I found a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with any of those three Abrahamic systems. There's a lot of, I guess you say, human reasons behind why I think they exist and how they developed. But at the end of the day, I was coming from a very fundamentalist area.
Mhm.
And our Orthodox friend, for example, who keeps talking from Orthodoxy over against Protestantism, maybe he's totally content and he doesn't feel in any way, shape, or form that there's anything wrong with people burning in hell forever. I mean, that sounds like what David is proposing when he says, I have no problem. God should destroy all of us. And I'm like, destroy the very creation that he made. It's just kind of silly. So there's a lot of reasons behind why I'm not a Christian or any other religious.
Yeah, and that's that's an understanding, that's an interpretation of how you perceive creation, how you perceive morality, and how you perceive humans. As I said at the beginning, David has an extremely pessimistic view of the world and humanity, and I mean, if you remove God from it, it looks like his views are very much in alignment with philosophical pessimism, actually, which is a view that people hold, and it is a view that people have around us, and they develop different ideas, different philosophical views on that. Antinatalism, in certain aspects, comes to mind that is similar to that in terms of some certain fundamental ideas. He thinks human nature is just completely messed up. Humans are messed up. Why are we even here? God should destroy us. That's his interpretation of the religion.
Yeah.
I would personally disagree with all that, no matter if I believe in God or not,
or even if people are messed up.
Yeah.
Right.
I think people are messed up. I wouldn't say people are horrible or messed up or they deserve destruction. I think it is entirely normal and expected that people are messed up, because people have a nature that is very much fundamentally based on surviving. And if you want to survive, you just do things that are messed up.
Well put. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. But thank you so much, Derek, for doing this with me. And thanks everybody for being here and for listening. Tell me what you expect. Tell me if we should do this again. Tell me if we should move on and have another conversation about this whole debate. Let us know if we should look into the rest of the debate, if we should look at specific parts of the debate. Thanks everybody for the chats and for the super chats. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I will see you again very soon. Is there anything else that you want to add, Derek?
If you want to hear more critical stuff, and trust me when I say it is critical, on the Hebrew Bible and of course the New Testament, I've recently decided to take my attention to scholarship in the Islamic world. Of the four horsemen, you have Sean Anthony, you have Marijn van Putten, Haitham Sidki, and then of course Shadi Nasir or Nasir. I've interviewed three of the four.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm about to have the fourth one on the channel. Want to take a critical analyzation there, like look at this closely. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that at Myth Vision Podcast. That's on YouTube.
I will be very honest. I think Derek, you have done something fantastic in terms of the direction that you recently took, talking to scholars about Islam, being critical, but letting Muslim scholars themselves, speak and all that. I think you have opened up something that nobody has really done before. I've never seen a channel before that actually went into this direction and talked about Islam critically, talked to scholars on Islam themselves, let them talk about this whole issue. This is a first that you are doing, and I really greatly appreciate it and admire it. And I think it will contribute in a fantastic way to the whole discourse that I am after and that we should be after. So thank you so much for that, and great work.
Yeah, I just want to say, if I may, I'm not interested in becoming part of that negative polemic. That's all I want to do. I want to educate people. People can make their own minds up, and I think cognitive dissonance is powerful. But at the end of the day, I openly, admittedly say my bias is, I think, just like Scooby-Doo. Every episode, it's a ghost, it's a demon, it's an alien, it's a monster, it's a god, it's an angel, it's a fairy, whatever. And then you pull the mask off, and it was a man or a woman. It was a human behind all of it. And at the end of the day, I think these religions developed in certain cultures, in certain times, under certain superstitions, and especially getting in Islam. This is directly from God, Gabriel, Muhammad, the whole night. It's like, let me take a look at myself. I haven't taken a look till now, and I'm starting to see some things. And I think you can come and be educated by my channel without the hate necessarily. I'm trying my best. I do have ex-Muslims come on though, because I relate to people who've deconverted from faith. So I connect to them, but I've had a lot of attacks from the Islamic world on that as well, because they're like, oh, you think you have experts because they're ex-Muslims? No, I never said that. I've interviewed literally 40, 50 PhDs in Hebrew and New Testament studies on topics. I never said once that you, for example, are an Islamic expert, like you are a scholar or something, you know?
Let alone that, I myself said many times, I read the scripture, I read a lot of stuff, I know a lot of stuff about it. I am not an expert. I explicitly said it. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar. I merely share my knowledge and my experience. And still, I have everyday people coming and telling me, just because you're an ex-Muslim, you think you're an expert? No, I don't think I'm an expert. I never said that. That's what you said. It's just part of the weird feedback that you get. It's interesting.
And
But
thank you
so
for
much,
having
Eric.
me on.
Thank you so much, Eric. Everybody, Myth Vision, I'll put his link in the description. I didn't do that apparently. Visit Myth Vision, find him there. Great stuff. And thank you so much again, Derek. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic day. And as always, stay away from Islam.